Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Rebecca Zahal. Rebecca Zahal was born on March 15, 1979, in Flam. She grew up in a large family. Rebecca's parents were devout Christians, and she was raised Protestant. Her family lived in Germany and Nepal for a while before moving to the United States in the early 2000s, settling in New York and California. Rebecca attracted the attention of many men, not only because of her looks, but also because of her charming personality. During her teenage years, Rebecca attended Cavalry Chapel Bible College in Austria, where she met Neil Nail Poi, a man from Arizona who was 13 years her senior. She fell deeply in love with him, and in 2002, they married when she was 23. They later moved to Phoenix, where Rebecca worked at an eye clinic. This couple's marriage had its ups and downs, lasting for 8 years before they divorced in 2011. During the breakup, Rebecca experienced significant turmoil. In 2009, she was arrested and pleaded guilty to shoplifting after stealing $1,000 worth of jewelry. She then began dating Jonah Oshanama, 54. Jonah is the chairman of a multi-million-dollar pharmaceutical company. He is the 9th highest-paid CEO in Arizona, earning more than $6 million a year. Rebecca first met Jonah while working as a technician at a Talmaloga, and they soon began dating. Their relationship became serious, although Rebecca was not yet divorced from Neil, and Jonah had been married twice before. His first marriage led to a 3-year custody battle over his 2 children. Jonah had a son, Maxwell Taryn, from his second marriage to Dina Romanoff in 2005. That marriage ended in divorce in 2010. After starting a relationship with Jonah, Rebecca quit her job at the eye clinic to spend more time with him and help care for the children. Rebecca lives in Jonah's massive mansion on Ocean Avenue in San Diego. However, Rebecca's life is not a fairy tale, and not everything is as it seems. The main issues stemmed from Jonah's 2 daughters from his first marriage, who did not get along with Rebecca. Their dislike for her became so intense that Rebecca considered either ending her relationship with Jonah. Despite this, Rebecca's biggest success was forming a strong bond with Jonah's youngest child, 6-year-old Maxwell. She cared for him like a mother, taking him to soccer practice, reading him bedtime stories, playing with him, and cooking for him as part of their daily routine. In July 2011, while Jonah was away on a business trip, tragedy struck. He believed his children were safe in Rebecca's care. Rebecca, along with younger sister visiting from Missouri, and Maxwell are both at home, each busy with their own activities. Everything seemed normal until Rebecca went into the bathroom. After a while, she was startled by a loud noise. Hurriedly dressing, Rebecca called out to Maxwell and younger sister, hoping for a response, but received no response. When she leaned over the railing, she found a horrifying sight. Maxwell was lying face down on the floor next to a fallen chandelier, surrounded by a pool of blood. Rebecca's younger sister, Zena, called 911 after Maxwell fell from the 2nd floor. When paramedics arrived, they rushed him to the children's hospital. Maxwell had fallen over the railing and hit his head on a chandelier. He landed face down and suffered serious injuries to his face and spinal cord, causing his heart to stop and cutting off oxygen to his brain. Doctors attempted to help Maxwell breathe, but unfortunately, the boy was deprived of oxygen for nearly 30 minutes, resulting in irreversible brain damage. Tragically, the Maxwell died 5 days later. Police investigated the incident and on July 26, concluded that Maxwell's death was an accident. Maxwell ran away down the upstairs hallway. Before he could stop himself, he fell over the 2nd floor railing. In an attempt to catch himself, he tried to grab the chandelier but instead hit the stairs railing on the way down. He landed hard on the floor. It seemed like a tragic accident, and many accepted it as such. Now, let's go back to July 12, 2011, the day after Maxwell's accident. Rebecca took her sister Zena to the airport and then picked up Jonah's brother Adam, who flew in from Tennessee. Meanwhile, Maxwell was still in the intensive care unit. Jonah then visited his son at the hospital while Rebecca and Adam stayed at the mansion. Adam stayed in a guest house on the sprawling estate, while Rebecca stayed alone in the mansion. Details of that evening are unclear, but neighbors reported loud music coming from the house throughout the night. The next morning, around 6:45 a.m., Adam awoke to a horrifying scene on the mansion's balcony. Rebecca's body was hanging there, with her hands tied behind her back and her ankles bound with red rope. A long-sleeved t-shirt was wrapped around her head. Adam quickly called 911. When asked about the girl's condition, Adam said he didn't know. Adam then cut the rope and tried to resuscitate her while waiting for the ambulance, but it was too late. 2 days after Maxwell's tragic death, Rebecca also died. The San Diego Sheriff's Department quickly began an investigation. In Rebecca's room, they discovered a red rope tied to the foot of the bed, extending out onto the balcony. What stood out, however, was a book on magic lying on the bed, with drawings of women with their hands tied behind their backs. The Rebecca's DNA was discovered on the knots of the rope and on the kitchen knife she used to cut the rope. Additionally, black paint stains were found on Rebecca's hands and the rope. There were no DNA or fingerprint traces from any unknown person. An autopsy conducted by the San Diego medical examiner revealed that Rebecca had sustained a traumatic brain injury. Several months later, on September 2, 2011, the Sheriff's Department officially concluded that Rebecca Zahau had taken her own life out of guilt related to Maxwell's tragic accident that had occurred just 2 days earlier. To back up these claims, police shared detailed findings, including demonstrating how Rebecca was able to tie herself up. According to them, the story begins with a late-night call from Adam, informing Rebecca that Maxwell was in critical condition and might not survive. Shortly before 1 a.m. on July 13, Rebecca began to execute her plan. She undressed and tied one end of a rope to the foot of her bed, then fashioned a noose with the other end. Afterward, she went out onto the balcony with the rope, tied her ankles together, and secured her hands behind her back with it. Ultimately, she leaned forward over the edge of the balcony and fell 9 feet. Rebecca lost consciousness within 15 seconds and died approximately 20 minutes later. Police reported that it was clear Rebecca died as a result of her own actions and by her own choice. Rebecca's family refused to accept the police explanation for her death. They were convinced that it was murder. Rebecca's family, including her first husband Neil, never thought she would intentionally harm herself. Just the day before her death, Rebecca had spoken to her sister Mary, in which she showed no signs of depression. While Rebecca expressed sadness about Maxwell, she assured her sister that she had no intention of taking drastic action. Additionally, Rebecca had strong religious beliefs and a deep love for her family. It is hard to believe that she would consider such an act. The Rebecca was buried on July 27, 2011, in St. Joseph, Missouri, but the fight for justice for Rebecca's family was just beginning. They publicly expressed doubts about the police findings, believing that the police was rushed. Determined to prove that Rebecca was murdered, they hired their own police and lawyers. The family also sought legal representation and pushed to have the case reopened. Upon reopening the case, they presented several compelling points. First, forensic evidence suggested that Rebecca may have suffered a head injury, but the medical examiner dismissed this claim without strong justification. Additionally, the police did not obtain information from Adam's mobile phone or review his messages to Rebecca on the night of her death. At the family's request, pathologist Dr. Cyril Wedge conducted a second examination of the body. He concluded that the fractures in Rebecca's throat were indicative of manual strangulation, suggesting that she may not have died by her own hand. During the department's investigation, several pieces of information were uncovered, including evidence that Rebecca had been abused before her death. Rebecca's family identified a prime suspect, Adam Shacknai. In February 2018, Rebecca's relatives filed a $10 million wrongful death lawsuit. Adam was accused of conspiring with Maxwell's mother, Dina, and her twin sister, Nina, to kill Rebecca out of revenge. They blamed Rebecca for Maxwell's accident while he was in her care. It was revealed that shortly after Maxwell's accident, around 11 p.m., Nina called Rebecca to discuss the incident. Rebecca did not answer, and surveillance camera footage showed Dina and Nina at the hospital that night when Rebecca died, leading to the sisters being cleared of any involvement. Rebecca's family's attorney accused Adam of assaulting Rebecca. The attorney also accused Adam of raping Rebecca and strangling her, then orchestrating her death. In response, Adam's defense attorney argued that there was no evidence linking him to Rebecca's death. He pointed out that Rebecca's fingerprints and DNA were found on the knife and rope used. A civil trial then took place in April 2018, lasting a month. During the trial, the jury found Adam liable for Rebecca's death. As a result, he was ordered to pay $5.2 million to Rebecca's family for their pain and suffering. Since this was a civil trial, a unanimous decision was not required. Adam did not face any criminal charges, so he could not be sentenced to prison, even though he was convicted. In December 2018, the San Diego Sheriff's Department confirmed that it would not overturn the original verdicts in the case. Civil verdicts can be appealed, and in February 2019, Adam appealed the civil court decision, arguing that there were procedural errors and misconduct among the jurors. Adam then reached a settlement that dismissed the civil lawsuit and reduced the original $5 million settlement to $2 million. Adam was furious about the settlement, claiming that it had been made without his consent. He criticized the judge for being incompetent in granting the settlement without his or his attorney's input. In response, the judge declaring that the civil lawsuit was now over. The jury's verdict in civil court found Adam Shacknai guilty of murdering Rebecca Zahau, and the verdict remains unchanged. However, Rebecca's family is determined to pursue further justice. They have vowed to continue their efforts until Adam is brought to justice. In August 2019, they announced a $100,000 reward for anyone who can provide information about the events surrounding Rebecca's death. Their attorney stated that it is important to gather all possible evidence and urged the sheriff to reopen the investigation immediately. The family is determined to fight the injustice Rebecca faced and will not give up. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Abril Perez. Abril Perez was born on November 18, 1971, in Monterrey, northeastern Mexico, to parents Maria del Seguro Sagan and Manuel Perez. She was the second of 3 children. Abril demonstrated exceptional mathematical and entrepreneurial abilities from a young age. She was a dedicated reader and consistently ranked as the top student in her class. As a teenager, Abril prioritized achieving financial independence, showcasing remarkable discipline and effective time management skills. Following high school, Abril attended the most prestigious university in New Leon, where she obtained a master's degree in finance and business administration. Her peers described her as intelligent, focused, and ambitious, while also being kind, cheerful, and always willing to assist others. After graduating, Abril secured a position in the sales department of one of the country's largest and fastest-growing companies. She later transitioned into digital sales, a rapidly expanding field, and discovered her true passion. Abril quickly rose through the ranks and became the executive director of the company within 2 years. Abril was a young, beautiful, and successful woman who was rapidly achieving her life goals. She had built a stellar career, supported her family, and had big plans for the future. However, her personal life was still unfulfilled, which worried her loved ones. Despite this, Abril was confident that she would find true love and live a long, happy life. But she had no idea how her future marriage to the seemingly perfect man would turn out. That man was Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, whom she met in the mid-1990s when her career was taking off. Juan Carlos was just 3 years older than Abril and shared her ambitious drive, which drew her to him. He, in turn, was captivated by her stunning looks, charming personality, kind heart, bright smile, sharp intellect, and remarkable determination. Juan Carlos graduated from a prestigious science and technology university, where he excelled in economics and trade. He then continued his studies at Harvard University in the United States. After returning to Mexico, he built a successful career in the emerging field of e-commerce. Juan Carlos and Abril met at a conference on the latest financial technologies. Their companies collaborated on several projects, allowing them to cross paths multiple times. Eventually, Juan Carlos realized he had developed feelings for Abril, who was intelligent and beautiful. He obtained her phone number through mutual acquaintances and asked her out on a date. Abril was also attracted to Juan Carlos, finding him to be educated, elegant, and engaging in conversation on a wide range of topics. Their relationship progressed rapidly, and by 1998, they decided to get married. At that point, they had both achieved significant success in their careers and were working on developing online stores, a field with great potential. Their life seemed like a fairy tale, inspiring envy and admiration from those around them. However, surface of their perfect family, there were some dark secrets. It wasn't until 2001, 3 years after their wedding, that they had their first child, a daughter named Ana Cecilia. The arrival of their child marked a new chapter in their lives. Her husband appeared happy, showing their newborn daughter love and admiration. 2 years later, Abril gave birth to a son, named Juan Carlos Jr., after his father. 2 more years passed, and the family had another child, a boy named Julio Andres. Despite having 3 young children, Abril hardly took any time off work and managed to balance parenting with career advancement. She made homemade meals, helped with schoolwork, took the children to sports activities, and aimed to be both a perfect mother and their best friend. Outwardly, the Perez Sanchez family seemed perfect, wealthy, successful, with 3 lovely children, and everything they could want. However, their home life remained a secret, even from their closest relatives, for a long time. In the early years of their relationship, Juan Carlos revealed his true personality to Abril. He had a short temper, was aggressive, and had a tendency to be overly harsh, refusing to compromise and insisting that everything be done his way. Initially, Abril was in love and believed that as time passed, Juan Carlos's rough edges would smooth out. Their shared projects brought them together, and their collaboration led to significant accomplishments, including financial success. However, as the years went by, Juan Carlos's irritability grew, and verbal arguments escalated into physical confrontations. Following the birth of their first daughter, he made a brief effort to control his emotions, but this change was short-lived. A similar attempt was made after the birth of their eldest son, but by the time their 3rd child arrived, Juan Carlos no longer made any effort to be a good father or husband. Juan Carlos frequently directed his anger and frustration at Abril and disregarding her emotional well-being. He would insult and belittle her, the mother of his children, and seemed to feel better when she cried. He regularly physically harmed her, doing so in a way that left no visible marks, allowing her to hide the bruises with clothing or makeup. His goal was to maintain his reputation as a model family man, loving husband, and father. Abril kept quiet about the abuse for years, not even telling her sister and mother about the ongoing situation. She earned a good income and could have raised the children on her own, providing them with a good education and stable upbringing. However, her husband was wealthy and influential, and she knew he could use the courts to take the children away from her. Knowing Juan Carlos's true nature, Abril couldn't bear the thought of her children being left alone with him, as she considered him a monster capable of anything. When the family situation reached a boiling point, what was once considered an ideal household now raised suspicions that something was terribly wrong. Abril was not just subdued, but deeply distressed and visibly struggling. She had lost weight, slept poorly, and frequently had bruises on her face and body that were becoming harder to hide and explain. Despite this, Juan Carlos appeared calm and confident in public, pretending that everything was fine. He played the role of a loving and caring husband, interacting with Abril politely and affectionately. However, at home, he transformed into a menacing figure. Despite loved ones urging Abril to divorce him, she insisted that everything was fine and that she could handle the problems with her husband on her own. 2014 marked the peak of Juan Carlos' career when he became the head of a major trading company, making him one of the most influential people in his field. Following this promotion, his family relocated to Mexico City, settling into a large house in one of the capital's upscale neighborhoods. Their children began attending an elite private school. Abril had genuinely hoped that this change of environment would improve their relationship. However, contrary to her expectations, the abuse continued. Juan Carlos often persisted in physically and verbally abusing his wife in front of their children. He increasingly accused her of infidelity without any basis for his claims. Whenever she tried to defend herself, he would resort to physical violence, insisting he would find evidence of her supposed disloyalty. Juan Carlos monitored her phone and emails, forbade her from using social media, and when finding no evidence, he hired a private detective to follow her and photograph any men who came near her. For 4 years, she tried every possible way to save her marriage. Despite her efforts, her husband's behavior became increasingly unbearable, creating a never-ending nightmare for her. To outsiders, however, their union appeared happy and successful, even enviable, due to her husband's wealth, influence, and seemingly caring nature. In 2018, the Juan Carlos and Abril visited to the Abril's family. During this trip, Juan Carlos treated his wife poorly in front of her parents, who were deeply disturbed by what they saw. This incident marked a turning point for Abril, and she realized that she could no longer continue living this way. She informed her husband that she would file for divorce as soon as they returned to Mexico City. Hearing this, Juan Carlos became enraged, grabbed her throat, and squeezed it so tightly that she nearly lost consciousness. Fortunately, her mother, Maria del Soro, entered the room and raised the alarm, preventing a tragedy. When the family returned to their home in the capital, Abril prepared for divorce and moved from the marital bedroom to a small guest room. However, this did not keep her safe from her husband's abuse. On January 4th, while Abril was still asleep, her husband entered the room holding a baseball bat. He struck her hard on the head and was about to swing again. Half awake, Abril barely understood what was happening, but she managed to roll off the bed just in time, saving her own life. She began to scream, and the children ran into the room, having heard the noise. The youngest son shielded his mother with his body, while the eldest son took the bat away from his father. Together, they fled the house and headed to the hospital, as Abril needed medical attention. Doctors diagnosed Abril with a severe concussion and a deep laceration above her eyebrow that required stitches. After Abril and their sons left the house, Juan Carlos contacted his lawyer to discuss the situation and asked for help in resolving the marital conflict. However, Juan Carlos also posted on social media, accusing his wife of betraying him by being unfaithful and planning to leave him for another man, taking their children and attempting to claim all their jointly acquired assets. Additionally, Juan Carlos claimed that Abril had stolen all the money from their home safe and had injured him with a knife when he tried to stop her. He posted photos of a bloodied knife and brown stains on the floor as evidence. However, the blood on the floor actually belonged to Abril from her own injury, and the knife photo was taken from the internet. Despite the fabrication, Juan Carlos's friends believed his story and actively shared and reposted his account on their social media pages, calling for widespread attention to this supposedly egregious case. Juan Carlos's attempt to kill Abril prompted her to take swift action. From her hospital bed, she filed a police report against him, accusing him of trying to take her life. After her release from the hospital, Abril packed up her 2 young sons and left the family home. Her oldest child, who was attending college in a nearby city, also condemned his father's violent actions. While waiting for justice, she started providing online support and consultations to women who were going through similar experiences. She also planned to open a center that would offer psychological and legal help to victims of domestic violence who had been failed by the justice system. It wasn't until 8.5 months after the incident, in September 2019, that Juan Carlos was finally arrested and charged with inflicting bodily harm and attempting to kill his wife. He was put in jail, where he spent over a month, but he managed to appeal the decision to keep him in detention before his trial. As a result, he was released from jail by November of that year. Judge Federo presided over the case, reclassifying it and ordering a new trial. During the trial, Abril's medical records and photos were not presented as evidence. Her and her son's testimonies were deemed insufficient to detain Juan Carlos because he claimed Abril was manipulating their children against him. The judge released Juan Carlos, concluding his actions didn't pose a direct threat to Abril's life. Abril was shocked and terrified when Juan Carlos was released. She suspected he had bribed his way to freedom, putting her and their children in danger. She wrote to the judge, expressing her fear, but it had no immediate effect. Juan Carlos then initiated a custody battle, forcing Abril to return to Mexico City with their sons to attend court hearings. Abril arrived in Mexico City on November 25 with her children. She had a legitimate fear of her longtime partner and wanted to avoid him. To minimize the risk of an encounter, she planned to leave the city immediately after a court hearing that day. In fact, she had already bought the plane ticket, but Juan Carlos already knew that. After the court session, Abril, her sons, and their lawyer got into a car headed to the airport. However, they never made it to their destination. At a traffic light, a motorcyclist suddenly pulled up next to their car, drew a handgun, and fired 2 shots at Abril, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. The attacker then quickly fled the scene. A shooting occurred, and one of the bullets grazed the younger son, who was sitting in the back seat. Fortunately, none of the children were seriously injured. However, the injured Abril was rushed to the nearest hospital where doctors fought to save her life for more than 6 hours. Unfortunately, due to severe injuries and significant blood loss, they were unable to save her. Abril passed away that evening. The victim's family, including her parents, brother, and sister, immediately flew to the capital and urged authorities to arrest Juan Carlos, whom they believed was behind the brutal act. However, law enforcement had a different perspective, stating that without identifying the shooter, it was difficult to determine the motive behind the attack. They also noted that they could not confirm with certainty that the shooting was ordered by Juan Carlos. The tragic case of murder sparked widespread outrage and public debate. Abril's family successfully drew attention to the case, highlighting numerous instances where men had attempted to kill women but escaped punishment. In response to the public outcry, the Mexican General Prosecutor's Office launched a new investigation into the suspect, Juan Carlos Sanchez, and also examined the actions of the judges who had previously released him. The judges who had released Juan Carlos could face consequences for their role in the Abril death if his guilt was proven. Juan Carlos took to social media to demand justice for his former wife's murder. However, his daughter, Ana Cecilia, accused him of cruelty and shared photos of her mother's hospitalization after Juan Carlos had attacked her with a bat, contradicting her father's claims that he would never harm her mother. Despite the media attention surrounding the case, he was initially allowed to remain free during the investigation. However, he was required to check in with the police weekly and was placed under a restraining order. When he failed to appear at the scheduled time, a warrant was issued for his arrest for violating the order. As expected, Juan Carlos could not be found, and it was later discovered that he had used his wealth and connections to quickly leave the country and enter the United States. Mexican authorities contacted Interpol, reporting Juan Carlos as a fugitive accused of a serious crime, and he was subsequently declared wanted worldwide. Meanwhile, efforts were underway to locate criminals in Abril's assassination. Surveillance footage from street cameras revealed that the motorcyclist who committed the crime was not alone. Two vehicles were seen following the car carrying Abril. The motorcyclist appeared to be in constant communication with the occupants of these vehicles, receiving directions and instructions. After several months of investigation, some of the participants were identified, and on March 5, 2020, 2 suspects were arrested in connection with the case. To everyone's surprise, the suspects did not resist arrest and quickly began cooperating with authorities, hoping to receive lighter sentences. It was confirmed that Juan Carlos was the mastermind behind the crime, and he had paid a significant amount of money to individuals who were directly involved in the crime. The first to be caught were the driver of one of the getaway cars and the motorcyclist who fired the fatal shots. It was discovered that while Juan Carlos was in prison, he had hired 2 experienced criminals to act as his personal bodyguards. One of these bodyguards was released from prison a week before Juan Carlos, and the other was released several days after him. After being released from prison, Juan Carlos reconnected with his accomplices and asked them to recruit trustworthy individuals to help carry out the murder of a person in exchange for a large sum of money. Once all participants were in place, Juan Carlos provided detailed instructions about the intended victim's travel schedule and mode of transportation. However, luring his former wife to Mexico City proved to be a challenge. Juan Carlos used coercion, threatening to take their children unless she attended a court appearance. Despite attending the court date, his ex-wife intended to return to Monterrey on the same day, which Juan Carlos knew about through his sources. 3 more individuals involved in the conspiracy were arrested in late October 2020. Initially, they were taken into custody on suspicion of distributing controlled substances, but further investigation at the police station revealed their potential connection to the high-profile crime. The arrested individuals were part of a major drug trafficking gang led by Balto, who had previously served time with Juan Carlos and offered him protection. In exchange for a significant reward, Balto agreed to help Juan Carlos eliminate his ex-wife. A few weeks later, in November 2020, Maldonado, an individual involved in the case, was also arrested. During his testimony, he confirmed that Juan Carlos had sought out reliable individuals to kill his ex-wife and that he had agreed to assist in exchange for a substantial reward. The investigation confirmed that Juan Carlos was the mastermind behind the crime. His earlier attack on Abril with a stick was reclassified as an attempted murder. As a result, the court issued an arrest warrant for Juan Carlos on charges of femicide. However, his location remained unknown. By spring 2021, the remaining suspects involved in the murder of Abril were apprehended. One of them was already serving time for a separate crime. The searches also led to the discovery of the gun used to kill Abril. In total, 9 individuals linked to the same criminal organization were detained, with 7 of them directly involved in the pursuit and shooting of Abril. More than 4 years after the Abril murder, the mastermind behind the crime, Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, is still on the run and his location is unknown. Meanwhile, The man who fired the fatal shot has been convicted and sentenced to 52 years in prison. 2 accomplices who participated in the car chase and coordinated with the shooter have each been sentenced to 50 years. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Gerardo couple. Jenner Gerardo was born December 19, 1970, in the city of Fort Wayne, Allen County, Indiana, USA. She spent her childhood and teenage years in the area. Jenner graduated from Bishop Luers High School, where she achieved excellent results in advanced courses. She then attended Purdue University at Indianapolis, studying communication and actively participating in the theater arts program. Later, she continued her communication studies at Butler University. Jenner earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in Communication and Theater Arts. Throughout her career, she worked in marketing for various Indiana companies, including roles in Carmel and Indianapolis. Notably, she served as marketing manager at Cercier Instrumentation for several years. In the summer of 1986, Jenner met Mark Gerardo in Fort Wayne, Indiana. At the time, they were both teenagers, and Jenner was working at a local Taco Bell. Mark was immediately drawn to her, captivated by her striking blue eyes and bright smile. Mark was initially unable to express his feelings to Jenner. The romance between Mark and Jenner only really began when they met again by chance after 4 years, at a nearby shopping mall where Jenner was working. He began visiting her frequently, and one day, she encouraged him to make a move, asking him directly when he would take her out. Jenner's confidence and willingness to speak her mind drew Mark to her. He described her demeanor as the opposite of his own, admiring her boldness. Melissa Murphy, a childhood friend of Jenner's, recalled how excited Jenner was when she first met Mark, saying Jenner was convinced he was the one and would do anything for him. Mark and Jenner got married on October 23, 1993, when Mark was 25 and Jenner was 23. Their relationship, which began in adolescence, continued to flourish into adulthood. Mark reflected on their happiness together, saying he couldn't imagine spending his life with anyone else. However, like any couple, Mark and Jenner faced challenges in their marriage and had to navigate the low points together. Mark said the arguments between him and his wife were very tense, and Jenner always won because she wanted to be the one to make the final decision. Mark's high school friend, Mike Hartman, shared that although he wasn't privy to all the details of their relationship, he knew they had fierce disagreements. Despite their strong marriage, the 2008 financial crisis significantly impacted them. Mark later mentioned that it changed everything, and money became a major source of stress and arguments. In November 2011, they relocated to Greenville, South Carolina, where they found new marketing jobs. Exploring the state's beautiful landscapes brought them closer together, and their marriage experienced a renewal. However, their renewed life came to a halt in 2017. Jenner lost her job, leaving her struggling to find a new one, and she was no longer the strong, confident woman she once was. Around this time, the couple felt it was time for a change and a fresh start. They decided to move to Delaware, and Mark began looking for a job right away. He came across a job posting at the University of Delaware for a creative director in the marketing department, a role that would come with supervisory responsibilities. Mark emailed his application and quickly received a response from a woman 15 years his junior, who would be his supervisor if he got the job. She invited him for an interview. Initially, Mark was nervous about working under someone 15 years younger than him, but his worries soon disappeared after meeting Meredith Chapman. This was their first encounter. At the time, Meredith was 33 years old and originally from Pennsylvania. She had graduated from the University of Delaware with a bachelor's in communication and a master's in education. She was married to Luke, a former New York City councilman, and they lived in Fairfield Crest, Delaware, with their dog Indy. The couple had married in 2009. During his interview, Mark was immediately drawn to Meredith's beauty and intelligence. He recalled thinking, "I have to work for this person," within 5 minutes of sitting across from her. He found her articulate, energetic, and passionate about her job, and was impressed by her accomplishments at such a young age. Meredith seemed impressed by Mark, as she immediately offered him the job. Mark gratefully accepted the offer and moved to Wilmington, Delaware in November 2017. His wife, Jen Eyre, stayed behind in South Carolina to lease out their home. Mark was excited about the new opportunity and the chance to advance his career. Unbeknownst to him, this marked the start of the demise of his marriage to Jen Eyre. Mark spent 45 days living alone in Delaware, getting to know Meredith better. They discovered they had a lot in common, and she invited him out for a drink one evening. Mark found it easy to talk to Meredith and opened up to her about his marriage to Jen Eyre, sharing some of his personal struggles. He also told her about the loss of his parents and brother. Mark was unaware of what was happening between him and Meredith at first. Mark stated that he really hadn't known what was happening. He admits that he feels affection for Meredith and expresses that being with her is a wonderful experience. After their dinner date, he started to understand his feelings and realized he was attracted to her. As Mark spent more time with Meredith, the issues in his marriage became more apparent. He began to compare Meredith to his wife, noting that Meredith praised him and made him feel appreciated, which was something his wife never did. Mark was really touched by Meredith's compliments. Mark was deeply attracted to Meredith, but he felt guilty about betraying his wife. As a result, he initially attempted to end his relationship with Meredith. However, he couldn't shake off the feelings he had developed for her, especially after learning that Meredith was unhappy in her own 9-year marriage. Mark explains that his relationship with Meredith is great, which made it difficult for him to shut down the relationship. He wanted to understand what drew them together. Before Jen Eyre joined her husband in Delaware, Mark and Meredith had already confessed their love for each other. Mark felt it was natural to express his love for Meredith, as the feeling was powerful. In December 2017, Jen Eyre moved north and noticed Mark's distant behavior. She soon confronted him, sensing that he might be involved with another woman. Jen Eyre asked Mark what was going on with him and said that he was acting different. Jen Eyre specifically mentioned Meredith because Mark often mentioned her when discussing new job. Although Mark initially denied the affair, Jen Eyre continued to question him, aware that something was amiss between him and Meredith. She began to closely monitor his activities. Mark is confused as to why Jen Eyre knows the private aspects of his affair with Meredith. Around Valentine's Day in 2008, Jen Eyre collected evidence that her husband was having an affair. However, this came at a cost. Mark discovered that Jen Eyre had hired a company to hack into his phone, allowing her to read his texts, view his photos, and access his call records with Meredith. Mark confessed to Jen Eyre that he had developed feelings for Meredith, unable to continue the deception. Jen Eyre, heartbroken but determined to save their marriage, asked Mark to attend marriage counseling with her, and he agreed. However, during their second session, Mark discovered a recording device hidden in his jacket. Initially thinking it was an anti-theft device, he realized it was actively recording him. Furious, Mark confronted Jen Eyre. She claimed she wanted to understand the extent of his relationship with Meredith and suspected they were planning something together. This has been marked the beginning of the end for Mark and Jen Eyre's marriage. Mark eventually told Jen Eyre that he intended to file for divorce in May 2018, once he had met the residency requirements in Delaware and could leave their shared home. During this period, Meredith Chapman's life was on an upward trajectory. She had landed a new role as assistant vice president at Villanova University in Pennsylvania and relocated to Radnor Township. Meanwhile, her marriage was coming to an end, paving the way for her to pursue a relationship with Mark. As Meredith and Mark's relationship deepened, Jen Eyre was Mark's wife at that time, began consulting with divorce coach Sheila Brennan. Jen Eyre was struggling with feelings of bitterness and anger, stemming from being replaced by a younger woman. Her concerns were compounded by financial uncertainty, having moved north without securing a new job. Jen Eyre's situation continued to deteriorate, ultimately taking a toll on her mental health. Mark noticed her distress and suggested that she see a psychiatrist for professional help. He also encouraged her to reach out to family and friends, as she had mentioned suicidal thoughts and even threatened to jump out of a window. Mark stated that Jen Eyre appeared to have come to terms with their upcoming divorce. She walked up to him with a list of things she wanted him to do in the weeks before he officially moved out. Her requests included activities such as going on hikes, having dinner together, and generally spending quality time as a couple. Mark agreed to fulfill her requests, thinking it would help Jen Eyre be in a better emotional state. During this time, Jen Eyre appeared to be acting normally, although she would occasionally become emotional and break down in tears. Over the next few weeks, Jen Eyre started posting on the app Nextdoor. She was looking for recommendations for a good marriage counselor who could help couples that were close to getting a divorce. In her post, Jen Eyre specified that they needed a counselor with extensive education and experience in handling complex issues such as infidelity, depression, traumatic experiences, and child-parent dynamics. However, unbeknownst to Mark, Jen Eyre had secretly been planning her revenge. On the night of April 23, 2018, Mark and his wife Jen Eyre were scheduled to meet at a restaurant to discuss their divorce agreement. However, Jen Eyre sent Mark a series of messages, first saying she was running late, then telling him to go home as she wouldn't make it to the. Mark got up to leave, but minutes later, he received a disturbing picture from Jen Eyre, an image of trash with a condom in the middle. This led him to believe Jen Eyre was rummaging through Meredith's trash can outside her home. More text messages followed, including one that said he had ruined co-life. Jen Eyre's next messages were even more ominous, saying she hoped he never found happiness and she had said goodbye to Mark. Alarmed and fearing for Meredith's safety, Mark tried to contact Meredith multiple times, but all his calls and texts went unanswered. Worried about a confrontation between Jen Eyre and Meredith, Mark rushed to Meredith's house. What he found was far more horrific than he had anticipated. Upon arrival, he discovered Meredith lying face down on her kitchen floor. Around her head was a pool of blood. Nearby, he also found Jen Eyre's lifeless body on the floor. Mark shouted in shock and ran to Meredith. He said, "Baby, oh baby, what have you done?" Meredith had excitedly posted on her Instagram about her new job at Villanova less than 2 hours before she died, expressing her excitement. According to Meredith's 5:42 p.m. post, after just 1 week on the job, she's already earned the love of fans at NOA Nation. Later that evening, she arrived at her home on Lowry Lane in Radnor Township, parked her Audi in the driveway, opened the door, and walked inside, unaware that Jen Eyre had broken in and was hiding, waiting to attack her. When Mark got there, Tim, one of Meredith's neighbors, was present. He mentioned that he heard a commotion and went out to see what happened. Mark asked him to call 911. Sergeant Christopher Ford of the Radnor Township Police Department said the call made his heart sink. Sergeant Christopher said they don't usually get calls like this. When they arrived, the scene was chaotic with a lot of police present. Mark, who appeared out of breath according to Christopher, was put in an ambulance before being taken to the police station as a suspect. After questioning Mark and discovering that the gun used in the 2 deaths was under Jen Eyre's body, the police concluded that Jen Eyre had broken into Meredith's home, killed her, and then committed suicide. The police received a tip from witness, who claimed to see a woman in a trench coat, hat, sunglasses, and possibly a wig watching the house with binoculars. They also found a set of car keys at the crime scene that were traced to a Cadillac rented by Jen Eyre. Mark was surprised to learn about the Cadillac. He said he learned most of this from the police and the news. Jen Eyre had rented the car 2 weeks before the incident, and it was parked just outside their apartment. Mark continued his investigation by examining his wife's bank statements, phone records, and computer backups, discovering that she was leading a double life. After Mark confessed to his affair shortly after Valentine's Day, he found out that Jen Eyre had opened a secret bank account and credit cards. She used these cards to buy audio surveillance equipment, a lock-picking kit, computer hacking software, and DNA testing kits for his clothes. Mark also revealed that she purchased advanced GPS tracking devices and attached them to both his and Meredith's cars. Mark stated that he had found over 400 images of private conversations between Meredith and him from text and Snapchat, and that Jen Eyre would access his phone in the middle of the night. On March 20, 2018, 5 weeks before committing the murder, Jen Eyre bought the gun she used in the murder and suicide. Her credit card statements showed that she practiced shooting the gun 3 times at a firing range. Mark claimed that Jen Eyre had secretly placed several recording devices in his clothes. He discovered files containing hundreds of hours of audio recordings his wife had not only recorded but also transcribed into notebooks. According to Mark, Jen Eyre had taken all his jackets and embedded multiple devices, constantly switching them in and out. Every day, she would remove a device, download the recorded content, and then sew it back into his jacket, repeating this process for weeks. It was revealed that on the night Jen Eyre killed Meredith and herself, she emailed a letter to her family, chillingly explaining her motive. She had begun the letter weeks prior, dating her entries, and described how it was an act of revenge for what he had done to her, saying, "That's as simple as it gets." Dr. Robbie Ludwig, a psychotherapist who studied marriage-related homicides and Red Letter, suggested that Jen Eyre may have been driven to kill Meredith and herself because she could not bear losing Mark. Dr. Robin commented that, in his opinion, there was something about listening to the recordings that made Jen Eyre angry and upset. Dr. Robin went on to say that Jen Eyre found the strength to act because she believed that her suspicions about her husband's character were correct. However, when she became suicidal and lost hope in life, she became more dangerous. It seemed that she had arranged everything to make her husband suffer. In a TV interview with Dr. Ozark, Mark shared a shocking revelation. Jen Eyre had written a 15-page letter, confessing that if he had walked in on the crime scene, she would have killed him as well. He acknowledged that he had hurt Jen Eyre, and his greatest regret was making her feel trapped and without options. He deeply wished he could travel back in time and erase the hurt he had caused. He confessed that his love for Jen Eyre had remained strong and never disappeared. Mark explained that he drove by Meredith's house multiple times as a way to cope with his emotions and come to terms with what had happened, helping him to process his feelings and move on. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of the Harvey family. Brian Taba Harvey, 49, was a local icon who rose to fame in the 1980s as the lead singer and songwriter of the indie band House of Freaks. Although he and his musical partner Johnny Hott went their separate ways professionally in the 1990s, they remained close friends. A dedicated musician, Brian performed on stage for the final time on New Year's Eve, unaware that it would be the last night of his life. On the other hand, Catherine Gravinsky, 39, found success as co-owner of World of Mirth, a popular toy store in Richmond's Carytown district. She was an artist who pursued various endeavors, including painting sets for community theater, working as a pastry chef and waitressing. Catherine had an older sister, Shelley Gravinsky, and was also the half-sister of actor Stephen Culp, known for his roles in TV shows such as The West Wing and Desperate Housewives, as well as various films. Brian and Catherine's paths crossed at the Border Cafe on Main Street, where Catherine worked and Brian frequently visited with Johnny. In 1990, Brian and Catherine got married. The House of Freaks then released an album featuring a song called I Got Happy, which was dedicated to Catherine. The couple had 2 daughters. Their first daughter, Stella, was born in 1996. After becoming a father, Brian realized that having children helped him find meaning in life and the importance of keeping hope for his children's future. Their second daughter, Ruby, was born in 2001. While working in the computer department of the Henrico County school system, Brian continued to pursue his passion for music. Meanwhile, Catherine started her own business, opening a unique toy and gift store called World of Mirth in the Carytown neighborhood. The store was designed to be a welcoming space for parents and children to spend time together, and children are free to play with the available toys. Brian Harvey's family lives in a quiet, quaint neighborhood south of Richmond. Their 2-story red brick house was surrounded by large trees, porch swings, and ivy-covered gardens. They had a cozy family room in the basement. The family was well respected and loved in the community, and it seemed no one had any ill will towards them. On New Year's Day, 2006, Brian, his wife Catherine, and their 2 daughters, Stella and Ruby, were preparing for a busy day. They were hosting a barbecue lunch for friends and family, a tradition they enjoyed every year on this day. They woke up early to get everything ready. That Sunday morning, Brian went outside to collect the newspaper, absorbed in the front-page news. He didn't lock the door when he came back in, which wasn't unusual for them, especially on party days when friends would be arriving. The neighborhood was considered safe, so they didn't think much of it. However, on that day, Brian was unaware that some criminals were secretly lurking nearby. Catherine was busy in the kitchen, preparing cookies for the guests who were expected to arrive soon. Suddenly, she heard voices coming from the living room and thought that some guests had arrived early. But when she went to check, she was shocked to see 2 strangers instead of familiar faces. Later, Brian, Catherine, and their young daughter Ruby were ordered to go downstairs to the basement playroom. Stella, who had spent the night at a friend's house, had not yet arrived home. Once the family was in the small room, the intruders used electrical cords and packing tape to tie them up. The intruders told them that as long as they cooperated, no one would get hurt while they searched the house. Just as the intruders were starting to ransack the house, someone knocked on the front door at around 10 a.m. The leader of the intruders untied Catherine and told her to answer the door. However, he warned her that if she tried to escape or ask for help, her daughter and husband would be killed. Catherine was in a difficult situation. Stella was about to arrive, and if she answered the door, she would put her daughter in danger. On the other hand, if she didn't answer the door, the intruder might get angry and hurt her family. In the end, Catherine decided that it was best to cooperate, so she opened the door. Stella suddenly ran past Catherine and into the playroom, where the family usually spent a lot of time together. Catherine quickly intervened, stopping Stella's friend from following her. Kyron Perkinson, the friend's mother, later expressed her surprise at Catherine's unusual behavior. When Perkinson asked Catherine how she was feeling, Catherine said she was not well. Then, she made a circular motion with her hand, mimicking a gun and pointing it at her head. This abruptly ended the conversation, and Catherine shut the door. This strange gesture would later trouble Perkinson, wondered if Catherine was trying to convey something. She wondered if Catherine being monitored by the intruders. Perkinson left, intending to return later for a party. All 4 members of the Harvey family were now inside the house. Catherine went back to the basement and found Stella had been securely tied up alongside the rest of the family. Everyone was caught helpless and defenseless. Chaos broke out unexpectedly and without any prior indication. The assailant revealed a knife taken from the Harveys' kitchen and began slashing the family members' throats. Angry that he had to wait so long for them to die, he ordered his accomplices to hit them hard on the head. However, the accomplice refused. The assailant then grabbed a claw hammer and ruthlessly struck the family members repeatedly until they stopped moving. After removing Catherine Harvey's wedding ring, the assailants set the room on fire using wine as an accelerant to conceal evidence of their crimes. As they escaped from the scene, they ate a plate of freshly baked cookies from the kitchen counter and stole a laptop, DVD player, and other items. They rushed out and entered the getaway vehicle parked outside, where a woman was waiting. She was related to one of the robbers and had been on lookout duty during the incident. They quickly departed, leaving the scene as quietly as they had arrived. Later that day, around 1:30 p.m., Johnny arrived at the celebratory gathering. Upon opening the front door, he was met with a thick cloud of smoke and a strong burning smell. Alarmed, he alerted the neighbors. They quickly called 911. Firefighters arrived at the scene and put out the fire. However, they soon discovered 4 bodies in the smoldering basement. Despite initial appearances, investigators determined that the fire did not cause the deaths. Instead, they found evidence of a more sinister cause. The investigation was now treating the incident as a murder case. The scene was so heartbreaking that it left even the police and medical staff, who were accustomed to dealing with traumatic situations, utterly stunned and shocked. Some were even seen crying openly. The discovery that parents were made to watch their children being brutally killed, and that children were also forced to witness the brutal deaths of their parents, was especially devastating. Autopsies revealed that Brian and Catherine died from blunt force trauma to the head. Stella's death was caused by a combination of blunt force trauma and smoke inhalation, suggesting she was still alive when the fire started. Ruby's cause of death was stab wounds to the neck and back, resulting in her death. The authorities immediately launched an investigation into the murders, but they had little evidence to work with. To gather more information, they appealed to the public for assistance. This approach proved successful when, on January 6, a woman named Latoya P.Y. contacted the police, requesting a welfare check on her friend, 21 years old Ashley Basil Tucker. Latoya expressed concerns that Ashley's boyfriend, 29 years old Ree Joseph Dandridge, and his uncle, 29 years old Ricky Javon Gray, were involved in the Harvey family's murder. Gray, who was slightly younger than his nephew by a few months, was reportedly the one in charge. The investigation took a significant turn when Latoya revealed that the 2 men had hidden evidence of their crimes at her residence. She disclosed that Gray and Dandridge had recently visited her home with a laptop that had an image of the Harvey family as its wallpaper. Given the extensive news coverage of the Harvey case, it was clear that the laptop belonged to the family. Latoya revealed information about the plan that Ashley, Gray and Dandridge had devised to rob Ashley's parents. According to the plan, Ashley would pretend to be a hostage, allowing Dandridge and Gray to extort money from the Basil Tucker, Ashley's stepfather. This would make Ashley appear innocent, even though Latoya knew about the plan and was offered a role in it. However, Latoya became suspicious of the group and declined to participate. Later, when Latoya asked Gray and Dandridge about Ashley's whereabouts, they gave a cryptic response, saying, "Ashley has gone bye-bye." This increased Latoya's concerns, and she contacted the police. The information she provided was crucial in helping investigators connect the dots. When investigators arrived at the residence where Ashley lived with her mother, Mary Baskerville Tucker, and stepfather, Basil Tucker, they found a gruesome scene. Inside the home, they discovered the lifeless bodies of all 3 victims, who had been subjected to a brutal and violent death, similar to the Harvey family. The victims were bound, gagged, and had their throats slit. Duct tape was wrapped tightly around their heads, causing additional suffering. Mary and Persile had deep neck lacerations, and Persile had a sock inserted into his throat. Ashley was found to have been suffocated with a plastic bag. The cause of death for all three victims was determined to be suffocation and torture. The police believed that the killer's primary motivation was a thrill-seeking desire, rather than any obvious personal benefit, so they worked together to catch them before they could hurt anyone else. Similar to the Harveys, Persile and Mary live a quiet life with no known enemies. Percy works as a forklift driver, while Mary works for a cleaning service company. Their peaceful life was shattered by their daughter's betrayal, leading to the tragic death of a couple enjoying their golden years. Investigators quickly discovered a crucial connection between the Harvey family's case and the Tucker family's case. Ashley was found wearing Catherine's wedding band, which had been missing and taken from Catherine. With this revelation, urgent action was necessary to apprehend Gray and Dandridge before they could inflict further harm. Authorities tracked Gray and Dandridge back to their home state of Pennsylvania and apprehended them in Philadelphia on January 7. Dandridge claimed that Gray planned the murders and he just followed orders. When faced with these accusations, Gray provided explicit and disturbing details of the two family massacres, explaining that financial gain was the primary motivation behind their actions. Notably, during the Harvey family murders, he was under the influence of an illicit substance called PCP, also known as phencyclidine or angel dust. This potent drug is known to cause auditory and visual hallucinations and often leads to aggressive behavior. During his confession, Gray showed no emotion, maintaining a chilling stare. His indifference to the lives he took led investigators to view him as a ruthless and heartless individual. Additionally, it was discovered that Gray was responsible for the murder of his wife, Trevor Terrell Gray, whose body was found in a shallow grave in Washington, Pennsylvania. The couple, married for 6 months, lived together in a house owned by Trevor's family. They shared the home with Gray's nephew, Dandridge. Trevor's parents reported that the couple frequently had intense arguments. On the day Trevor's body was discovered, Gray had claw marks on his forearm. Initially, neither Gray nor Dandridge were considered suspects by the Washington police. Trevor's mother, Manna Squires, claimed that the police thought Trevor's death was due to a drug overdose, which led to a slow investigation. Trevor's death initially raised suspicions, but a thorough investigation did not occur until Gray confessed to the crime in 2006. On December 31, 2005, a violent assault occurred outside a home in Arlington. Two men, later identified as Gray and Dandridge, attacked 26-year-old Ryan Key in front of his parents' house. The assault left Ryan with severe injuries, including stab wounds to the chest, neck, and arms. He spent 2 weeks in a coma due to the near-fatal attack. Additionally, he permanently lost the use of his right arm. Gray and Dandridge faced multiple charges related of the Tucker's family killings. Gray was charged with 5 counts of capital murder, while Dandridge faced 3 counts of murder. Despite initially admitting to their involvement, both men pleaded not guilty. Gray's 6-month trial concluded with a guilty verdict on all counts. He received a life sentence for the murders of Brian and Catherine Harvey. The court also sentenced him to death for the brutal murders of Stella and Ruby. Following Gray's conviction in September 2006, Dandridge chose to accept a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in December 2006. Gray also faced charges in Culpeper County for the murder of Cheryl Warner, a 37-year-old mother of 3 who was found shot and hanged in her burning home. Gray pleaded not guilty, but the charge was later suspended due to conflicting evidence on June 4, 2008. Over the next 9 years, Gray's lawyers filed multiple appeals. They argued that Gray's traumatic childhood had affected his mental capacity. However, the Supreme Court rejected his case in 2016. As a result, Gray was scheduled to be executed on January 18, 2017. On the scheduled date, with all appeals exhausted, Gray was put to death by lethal injection at Greensville Correctional Center. Meanwhile, Dandridge remains in prison at Sussex II State Prison. The Harvey family's brutal murders sent shockwaves of horror and grief through the community. Over 1,400 people attended their memorial service, expressing condolences and sorrow outside Catherine's store. Flowers, dolls, and candles formed a poignant tribute along the curb outside the red brick house. The candles, lit by children, remained glowing for weeks. Catherine's brother Culp described the murders as a devastating blow that felt endless. He spoke about the pain of thinking about the family's final hours, saying that everyone was trying to move forward. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Els van Doren. Els van Doren is a 38-year-old Belgian woman married to a jeweler in Antwerp named Jan de Wilde. They has 2 children, Vincent de Wilde and Carol de Wilde. Although she works in the family jewelry store, Elsa's real passion is skydiving. Els began skydiving with her husband in 1994. Gradually, her passion for skydiving grew rapidly over time. With over 2,300 jumps under her belt, she became an experienced skydiver. She devoted most of her weekends and holidays to the sport. In 1998, Els began skydiving in formation, and 3 years later, in 2001, she became a member of an all-female skydiving team called the Divas. The team competed in the 2003 World Parachute Championships, but Els was forced to leave the team in 2004 due to health problems stemming from a persistent hernia. After recovering, she turned to parachuting as a recreational activity instead of continuing to compete professionally. He became a member of the Swartberg Parachute Club, and by 2006, her jump total had exceeded 2,300. In the Parachute Club, she formed a close friendship with a fellow parachutist and schoolteacher, a 26-year-old named Els Klotmans. To differentiate between the two of them within the club, Els van Doren suggested calling Els Klotmans by the nickname Babs. They both learned to parachute under the guidance of Marcel Summers, another club member who knew both women. The trio developed a deep friendship and even became companions on their skydiving adventures. However, over time, Els found herself growing attached to Marcel, despite her husband. Their friendship gradually developed into a romantic relationship. Since her family was accustomed to her being away on weekends for the skydiving club, they did not suspect anything regarding her relationship with Marcel. Indeed, they often went to Marcel's apartment on weekends and stayed together without worries. Unbeknownst to Els and Babs, they not only shared the same name but also loved the same man. Marcel secretly maintained romantic relationships with both women. To keep the two relationships balanced, Marcel created a schedule. He devoted Fridays to Babs and Saturdays to Els. This arrangement initially worked to Marcel's advantage. However, it did not last long due to an unexpected event that occurred one particular weekend. On the evening of Friday, November 10, 2006, Babs went to Marcel's house as she did every week. At that time, she was unaware that Els had planned to surprise Marcel with an unexpected visit that night. Babs and Marcel had dinner together, and then they returned to Marcel's apartment. There, they found Els waiting outside the door. The content of their conversation is unknown, but it is certain that Babs did not sleep in the same bed as Marcel that night. Instead, Babs slept in a sleeping bag on the living room floor, while Els and Marcel went into the bedroom. In the living room, Babs discovered Elsa's parachute lying next to the other parachute equipment. She felt deeply hurt and betrayed that her friend had deceived and replaced her. These pent-up emotions pushed Babs to the point of committing a reckless act, leading to tragic consequences that no one could have foreseen. Then, on November 18, 2006, 12 members of the skydiving club, including Els, Babs, and Marcel, boarded a flight over Flanders. The plan was for Els, Babs, Marcel, and another skydiver named Tom to jump in a four-person formation at an altitude of 13,000 feet. In this formation, they would link arms before releasing and deploying their parachutes. As they prepared to jump, Els, Marcel, and Tom exited the plane as planned. However, it appears that Babs, perhaps due to a delay or on purpose, jumped a little later than the others. During the free fall, Babs was unable to catch up with the group. At 9,000 feet, Marcel, Els, and Tom broke formation, preparing to deploy their parachutes safely. At this point, it was clear that something serious had occurred, as Els tried to deploy her parachute by pulling the cord, but it refused to open. Trying to stay calm, she recalled the emergency procedures from her training. Having encountered a failed parachute before, she had successfully deployed her backup parachute on that occasion. However, in this case, hurtling through free fall at around 200 kilometers per hour, she had only 20 seconds or less to make a life-saving maneuver and land successfully. Despite her efforts, pulling the backup cord proved futile, and the parachute still did not respond. As her desperation grew, she continued to pull on both the main and backup parachutes, but there was no response. Marcel, who was at an altitude of 800 meters, observed Els, who was only 500 meters above the ground, and sensed that something was wrong because her parachute had not yet deployed. However, he could do nothing but watch the horrifying scene unfold. In a last desperate attempt, Els tried to untangle her parachute cord, hoping to activate it, but her fate was sealed. Meanwhile, in the town of Upabbeek, as these events unfolded, a woman was hanging her clothes out in her garden. A loud noise suddenly made her panic. Looking up, she witnessed a woman swooping down from the sky with a parachute aimed toward her garden. This sight was not unusual, as her residence was only a few kilometers away from the parachute club and its landing site. When she turned back to continue her laundry, the woman discovered a white cloth caught in the top of her bush. Moving closer, she saw a figure lying in the bushes. She quickly called her husband, who was also in the garden doing maintenance, and they contacted emergency services. It was Els, whom they assumed was one of the parachutists, but unfortunately, she showed no signs of life. Marcel, on the other hand, had found a safe landing spot, frantically calling for Els and trying to locate her. Spotting an ambulance, he gave chase, following it to the NEA RBY location where Els had landed. When he lunged toward her, he had to be restrained to allow the rescue team to approach. When the emergency services arrived, resuscitation efforts were made, but to no avail. Els was dead. Marcel insisted on keeping Elsa's parachute intact, stating that it was unusual that neither the main nor the backup parachute had opened. He then contacted her husband, Jan, to deliver the bad news. Jan rushed to his wife's side while Tom returned to the club to relay the sad news of Elsa's death to the other members. When news of Elsa's death was revealed, Babs, feeling overwhelmed, fell to her knees and cried bitterly. Elsa's husband, Jan, arrived at the club to collect her belongings and met Babs, who offered to help him retrieve Elsa's belongings. He observed her seemingly motionless and noticed a strange smile on her face. At that moment, Babs headed toward the dressing room, with Jan following closely behind. However, upon arriving, Babs abruptly slammed the door, locking Jan out. He recounted that it took Babs quite a while before she finally emerged with Elsa's belongings. Meanwhile, at the scene of the accident, police recovered Elsa's parachute and helmet, which was equipped with a video camera that recorded her fateful jump. An autopsy conducted to determine her condition but found no traces of alcohol or drugs that could have impaired her functioning. Her death was classified as either homicide or suicide, believed to have been caused by multiple fractures and internal bleeding from the impact of the fall. Elsa's family suspected that she might have been murdered by someone in her paragliding club who knew how parachutes worked. After the police revealed that Els had been having an affair with Marcel Summers for more than 5 years, the family's grief intensified. Jan was particularly hurt when he learned that other club members, some of whom he considered friends, also knew about the relationship. Additionally, Els had provided false info to her club friends, claiming that she was divorced from her husband. Her funeral took place just 1 day before her daughter Carol's 15th birthday. During the solemn ceremony, Carol was moved to share a heartfelt message. She recalled the family's constant advice to her mother to stop parachuting. Through her story, Carol clearly expressed how much her family missed her mother. She ended her speech by acknowledging her mother's desire for privacy and emphasizing that she would not have been happy to give up her hobby. After the funeral, the police launched an investigation due to growing concerns about the failure of Elsa's backup parachute. A parachuting expert familiar with parachute mechanics was called in to examine Elsa's parachute for any flaws or irregularities. The experts quickly discovered that a crucial component was missing: the pilot's parachute, a vital part of the system. The pilot's parachute plays a key role in deploying both the main and backup parachutes. The examination revealed that her parachute had been deliberately detached, suggesting outside interference. In addition, there were clear signs of tampering, notably with the main parachute, which the pilot was responsible for deploying, and one of the slings connected to the emergency parachute. When reviewing the final body camera footage of Elsa's jump, a striking detail emerged: an unidentified piece of red fabric hovering in front of her that was not part of Elsa's parachute equipment. Investigators are having trouble determining the origin of the red object, so they asked residents of UPAB to thoroughly check their gardens and the surrounding area. If they find the object, investigators advise them to handle it with care, as it may contain DNA from the person who sabotaged Elsa's parachute. Unfortunately, people were unable to locate this important piece of evidence. After Elsa's tragic death, an unexpected event occurred on Monday. Babs found the pilot's parachute. Babs reported that she discovered the parachute when returning from Marcel's apartment and that it had been stuck in a tree along the path between UPAB and Genk. Rather than contacting the police directly, Babs chose to inform Marcel of her discovery. Upon hearing this, Marcel called the police, who quickly arrived at the scene. When the police arrived, they found Babs anxious, confused, and clearly affected by the incident. However, they were skeptical of her story when she claimed that she had discovered the parachute by accident. She explained that it was a complete coincidence and that she had simply decided to take a different route home that day instead of her usual path. According to her account, while stuck behind a slow-moving tractor, she looked up and saw a parachute hovering about 20 meters above the ground, which made her think it might be a sign from the heavens from Els. However, the police were doubtful of this story, as only the investigators knew that the parachute was missing at the time. Meanwhile, the main suspects in Elsa's murder included her husband Jan, her lover Marcel, and her friend Babs. The police searched Marcel's house and concluded that he was not a suspect. They also ruled out Elsa's husband from the list of suspects. Next, the police expanded their investigation to Babs's house, where they seized many items, including Elsa's phone, laptop, and personal diary. These diaries had been recommended by a psychiatrist for Els to record her feelings. Babs was then asked to come to the police station for questioning to gather more information about her relationship with Marcel and Els, as well as to clarify the events leading up to Elsa's death. During questioning, Babs firmly denied any involvement in the destruction of Elsa's belongings. Instead, she attempted to blame Marcel, claiming that he had kept Elsa's belongings while she was at their home the previous weekend. She also accused Jan of keeping Elsa's belongings during the week. After the questioning, Babs was really asked and allowed to return home. However, a second questioning was scheduled for December 20th, 2006, but Babs did not show up. Subsequent investigations revealed that she had attempted to end her own life early that morning. After taking an overdose of sleeping pills and antidepressants, she became unresponsive. Her mother rushed her to the hospital for emergency treatment. In letters written before the act, she shared with loved ones the pain of losing her best friend and the overwhelming stress of being considered the prime suspect in the murder. Babs was then admitted to a psychiatric facility for observation and treatment for 15 days. Having long been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and depression, this was not the first time she had attempted to harm herself. Marcel believed she was merely trying to get attention and had severed ties with her. He thought her self-harm was a ploy to distract from her role in Elsa's death, rather than a genuine desire to end her life. Elle suspected she had taken medication just before her mother returned home to create a dramatic situation. He believed the police were closing in on her and that they would arrest her once they uncovered her lies. At that time, while she was receiving psychiatric treatment, Babs was arrested on January 11, 2007, on suspicion of murder. On January 19, 2007, she appeared in court and was subsequently remanded in custody while the investigation was ongoing. Babs refused to take a polygraph test despite being asked to do so. Further investigation into Els van Doren's parachute equipment revealed that the parachute cord had been deliberately cut with scissors. Based on the cut marks, it was determined that the person who cut the parachute cord was probably right-handed. By March 2007, Babs had been detained for 3 months and had undergone extensive interrogation. Despite the intense pressure, she refused to admit her guilt. During the interrogation, Babs confessed to sending an anonymous letter to Els, in which she acknowledged that her actions towards Elsa's family were wrong. However, this letter was misunderstood by Jan, who thought it was merely a criticism of Elsa's frequent absences due to her passion for parachuting. He discarded the letter without taking it seriously, but it was actually a warning that Babs intended to send to Els to end her relationship with Marcel. Additionally, Babs admitted to calling Marcel anonymously at a time when he was with Els, intending to intimidate them both. Investigators closely examined Babs's automatic activation device. Upon examination, they noticed that she jumped later than the other members of the group. However, her parachute activated earlier, allowing her to observe the events that followed from above. This strategic move also enabled her to locate Elsa's parachute, which she could retrieve later. In September 2008, Babs's lawyer successfully secured her bail, and although the case was still under investigation, she continued to work at the school. Babs's murder trial began on September 24, 2010. During the trial, the prosecution expressed confidence in the evidence they had gathered and believed there was sufficient evidence to charge her with murder. The defense argued that the murder was motivated by Babs's jealousy over her lover's relationship with her best friend. Babs had previously confessed to investigators that she knew she was second to Els in Marcel's eyes. She admitted that Marcel liked Els more than he liked her, which made her feel inferior. The prosecution suggested that her desire to eliminate her rival and remove Els from the relationship provided a plausible motive for the murder. Babs's defense attorney argued that the prosecution based their case only on circumstantial evidence and unproven claims. In her testimony, Clarence stated that she did not see a future with Marcel and that her intimacy with him was a result of her low self-esteem. She also tried to imply that Carol, Elsa's doll, Gaida might have wanted to get back at her mother for being absent most weekends. Despite her sincere efforts to persuade the jury and shift blame, the jury's verdict remained the same. On October 20, 2010, Babs, whose real name was Els Klotmans, was convicted of murdering her friend, Els van Doren, and sentenced to 30 years in prison. She later appealed, arguing that the police had questioned her without her lawyer present. In May 2011, her appeal was denied. However, in June 2022, after a third appeal and serving 12 years and 6 months, Els Clarence was granted conditional release from prison and is now free. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Megan Landowski. Located on the shores of the Chesapeake Bay in Portsmouth, Virginia, is a bustling seaport town that is also home to both the U.S. Navy and Coast Guard. The town's tree-lined streets are home to naval officers and their families. Among them is Navy officer Chris Short, his wife Angela, and 3 stepchildren, Elizabeth, Megan, and Corey. After a year stationed at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, Chris was transferred to a naval hospital in Portsmouth, much to his family's delight. 16-year-old Megan, the eldest of the siblings, was excited to start her new life in Portsmouth. She promptly signed up for dance classes, as she had a strong passion for dance. Megan had a natural ability and quickly excelled in various dance styles, starting with ballet. Her mother, Angela, described Megan as a lovely, friendly, and talented young woman who easily settled into her new school, Woodrow Wilson High School. Megan was a lively and kind person, and that helped her swiftly made friends at her prestigious dance high school. However, she longed to attend a regular high school to be with her neighborhood friends. On Thursday, April 10, 2008, Megan woke up early for school and had a conversation with her mother about an upcoming test. They said their goodbyes, and Megan headed off to class. Unbeknownst to her mother, Angela, this would be the last time she saw her daughter alive. Megan's school day finished earlier than usual, so she headed home. Her mother had asked her to call as soon as she arrived. When Megan got home, she left a voicemail for her mother, telling her all about her day, letting her know she was safe, and saying she loved her. After that, Megan started making herself some lunch. However, the situation took a devastating turn around 4 p.m. that day. Chris, Megan's stepfather, came home to find the front door open. At first, he wasn't too worried, knowing Megan had been reminded to keep it closed. But he planned to remind her again. As he called out her name while walking through the house, he was met with only silence. As he entered the kitchen, he was met with a horrific scene. Megan was lying lifeless on the floor, a victim of murder. Chris later described the scene, saying Megan looked like a porcelain doll, eerily still and staring blankly into space. Local detective Doug Funkhauser was on his way to celebrate his anniversary with his wife when he received a distressing call about the murder of a young girl in town. He rushed to the scene, where he was met with a shocking and disturbing sight. As he neared the house, he noticed blood stains on the door handle. Inside, he found Megan's body on the kitchen floor, partially naked and surrounded by a large pool of blood. She had multiple stab wounds on her back, neck, face, and throat, and her mouth was sealed shut with tape. As a seasoned investigator, Detective Doug had seen many brutal cases, but this one stood out due to the victim's young age. The fact that he had 3 children of his own made him even more determined to catch the perpetrator and bring them to justice. Investigators found no signs that the killer had broken into the house. However, a leaf found inside the house, which matched the bush outside the first-floor window, suggested that the attacker entered through that window. The assault is believed to have started in an upstairs bedroom. Signs of a struggle were evident, with the bed in disarray. On the floor, police found Megan's underwear. An adhesive tape box discovered under the bed was matched to the tape used to restrain Megan's arms and cover her face. Bloodstains on the tape were collected for further analysis. Additionally, pillows, sheets, and blankets from the bed were collected for forensic examination. Further investigation of the bedroom revealed new evidence. Seminal fluid was found on the duvet and in Megan's underwear, indicating that she had been sexually assaulted before being brutally murdered. Downstairs, Megan sustained 43 stab wounds, 11 of which were inflicted after she had already died. Her body was discovered naked from the waist down, with her arms bound behind her back using tape. The forensic team quickly identified a murder weapon when they noticed 2 knives was missing from its holder on the kitchen counter. Later, a knife was found in the sink. It was determined that Megan was first attacked in her room but managed to escape downstairs, where she was fatally assaulted. The perpetrator then moved through the house, leaving footprints behind. After washing their hands in the sink, they left one of the 2 knives used in the murder. The other knife, taken from the kitchen, was found in a nearby storm drain. Detectives urgently needed to catch the killer. They quickly started investigating, thoroughly searching the neighborhood for witnesses who may have seen or heard something suspicious during the crime. However, no one came forward with any relevant information. It seemed the perpetrator had escaped in broad daylight. The town was gripped with fear, as parents worried about their children's safety, and many were too afraid to sleep at night knowing a killer was still at large. After the initial shock of their daughter's murder, Angela and Chris quickly told the police who they suspected was responsible. They accused Robert Hickey, someone they used to know, who had a troubled past, and they were confident in their accusation. When Megan was 16, she was sexually assaulted by Robert Hickey, a Navy colleague of her stepfather Chris. Robert and Chris worked together as technicians and had become close friends. Chris and his family would often invite the Robert over. After being sexually assaulted, Megan became withdrawn and her grades started to slip. Chris noticed the change in her and asked what was wrong, but Megan was hesitant to talk about it at first. Eventually, she opened up to Chris and told him that Robert had been secretly assaulting her. Chris was furious and disgusted. He immediately cut off all ties with the Robert family and reported the incidents. 5 months before her murder, Megan's parents had started legal proceedings against Robert, and a trial was pending. Now, they suspected that Robert had killed Megan to prevent her from testifying against him in court. They thought he was afraid of damaging his reputation and going to prison. Megan had even expressed her fear that Robert would come after her, and sadly, it seemed her fears had come true. Officers went to Robert's home to search for evidence linking him to a murder. Although they didn't find any direct evidence, a later examination of his computer, they discovered he had deleted some data. A deleted file was recovered, containing illicit images of minors, which led to Robert being charged with possessing child pornography. This made him the main suspect in the murder investigation. When questioned about the murder, Robert appeared nervous but claimed he was at the Navy base all day. He denied any involvement and said he didn't leave the base. However, after checking his alibi with colleagues, police found a gap in his timeline, suggesting he could have been suspect. Security footage was checked, but it showed that Robert had not left the base. Despite this, he was still considered a suspect and could not be completely cleared of suspicion. A DNA sample was collected from Robert to compare with the DNA found at the crime scene. However, the results revealed that there was no match, ruling Robert out as Megan's killer. This unexpected outcome left the officers disheartened, as they were now without leads or suspects other. The focus then shifted to Chris, who had discovered Megan's body. After collecting a DNA sample, Chris was quickly cleared as a suspect. Megan's family members, including her younger brother Corey, were also eliminated as suspects. An autopsy showed that Megan was murdered with extreme brutality, described as an overkill. This level of violence indicated that the perpetrator was fueled by intense anger, which raised questions about their motive. Megan was well-liked and didn't appear to have any enemies. It seemed likely that the killer was someone she knew. However, the lack of obvious enemies made it even more puzzling as to who could have committed such a horrific crime. As the investigation continued without identifying any suspects, Megan's parents were faced with the disturbing reality that her case may remain unsolved forever, denying them justice for their daughter. To search new leads, detectives looked into Megan's school life, looking into whether she might have had a secret boyfriend, someone who admired her, or an enemy within her school. They questioned one of Megan's close friends, hoping to gain useful information, but the friend couldn't provide any significant details. The police then spoke with other people from Woodrow Wilson High School who knew Megan. They discovered that she had been in a few romantic relationships, but none of them were serious. Although none of these individuals seemed suspicious, but the police still took DNA samples from these people for further investigation. Forensic experts analyzed DNA evidence from the crime scene to determine the perpetrator's geographical origin. The results suggested that the perpetrator was an African-American male. After 6 months with no significant leads, a classmate provided a list of boys Megan had flirted with. The police reviewed the list and found that all the individuals, except one, had already been interviewed. The exception was 17-year-old Robert Lee Barnes. Megan had met Barnes through a performance arts program at Churchill High School, where they both participated. Megan had told a friend that she thought Barnes had feelings for her, but she didn't feel the same way. Barnes was a talented violinist and a diligent student with no disciplinary issues. He was friends with Megan and had visited her home several times. Her parents described him as polite and kind. When questioned by police, Barnes followed the standard procedure and described Megan as kind. Initially, the police interview with Robert did not raise any suspicions. However, when asked if he would be willing to provide a DNA sample, Robert hesitated, then he refusing. This refusal was unusual, as all of Megan's other classmates had agreed to cooperate. When questioned about his refusal, Robert explained that his mother would not approve of him providing a DNA sample. The police clarified that, as he's 17 years old, Robert did not need his mother's consent. Nevertheless, Robert declined again, leaving the investigators with the feeling that something was not quite right about him. At the end of the interview, Robert was requested to obtain his mother's consent for the DNA sample and to contact the investigators afterward. The next day, Robert requested a meeting with the investigators. When asked if he had obtained his mother's consent, he replied that he had not. However, he offered to provide a DNA sample in the form of the bubble gum he was chewing. He removed the gum from his mouth, placed it in a latex glove, and handed it over to the investigators. Despite the investigators continued to suspect that Robert might be hiding something. Later on, the detective got a call from the lab that was analyzing the bubble gum. The lab asked where the gum had come from. After the detective confirmed that he saw Barnes put the gum into the glove, the lab asked if Barnes was under constant watch. This was surprisingly, because the DNA on the gum belonged to a female. It turned out that Barnes had switched the gum he was chewing with a different piece, which he then gave as his sample. On October 23, 2008, Barnes was brought in for questioning again, this time with his mother. The police wanted to confront him with the DNA results. During the interview, after being questioned about the gum, Barnes made a slip of the tongue by saying, "This happened on Thursday." Up to that point, no individual interviewed by police knew the exact date and time of the murder. When questioned about this by the police, Barnes gave a very unreasonable and suspicious explanation. He said that Megan had invited him to her home. Upon arrival, he found her being held at gunpoint by a masked person. According to Barnes, the attacker then pointed the gun at him and forced him to tie Megan up. Barnes further said that he was forced to sexually assault Megan against his will. He then stated that they all went downstairs, where the assailant seized a knife and stabbed Megan. Additionally, Barnes stated that the attacker compelled him to inflict an injury on himself, thereby leaving his blood at the scene. However, Barnes had made up this story to make himself appear as a victim and explain away any evidence that might implicate him. The police were not convinced by his story and do not believe any of his testimony. Police presented Barnes with evidence of footprints found at the scene, noting that only his footprints were present, with no sign of the alleged assailant's footprints. However, before Barnes could respond, his mother interrupted, defending his character and stating that he was a good and innocent kid. However, after taking a DNA sample from Barnes and analyzing it, the results revealed a match between his DNA and DNA evidence from the crime scene, contradicting his claims of innocence. Consequently, Robert Lee Barnes was arrested and charged with the murder of Megan Landowski. Megan's parents were shocked by the news, and they struggled to understand how the quiet boy who rode the school bus with their daughter could commit such a violent act. According to the police investigation, Barnes likely entered the home through a window that afternoon, sexually assaulted Megan in her bedroom, finally brutally killing her. Megan managed to escape downstairs, but Barnes chased after her and stabbed her multiple times with a kitchen knife, even after she had died. He then left the scene and continued with his life as if nothing had happened. Investigators believe that Barnes had become fixated on Megan, who only wanted a friendship. When Megan rejected his advances, Barnes became coercive and violent, ultimately leading to a tragic outcome. In September 2009, Barnes accepted a plea deal that allowed him to avoid being tried as an adult, despite having turned 18. He pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and aggravated sexual battery. Robert Lee Barnes was sentenced to 42 years in prison and is currently serving his sentence at Red Onion State Prison in Wise County, Virginia. Regardless of whether Barnes was motivated by love, desire, anger, or rejection, nothing justifies his heinous actions. Instead of moving on, Barnes chose a dark path that led to a tragic end. This choice not only took an innocent life but also destroyed his own and hurt the people who Megan's loved ones. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Diana D. Aiello. Diana Aiello was born in 1959 in Tustin, a suburb of Los Angeles. Her father had a military career, and her mother worked at a local garment factory. At the age of 19, Diana's life took a major turn when she met Kevin Green at a bar. She was at the bar with her friends when some men started bothering them. He was being aggressive, so Kevin decided to intervene. After Kevin chased the men away, Diana offered to buy him a drink as a thank you. A few days later, they started dating, and things went pretty fast from there. At the time, Kevin was married, but he and his wife were in the process of getting a divorce. Kevin and Diana decided to move in together, and Diana soon became pregnant. As soon as Kevin's divorce was finalized, they got married that same day, eagerly awaiting the birth of their daughter. They rented an apartment in a small apartment complex in Tustin. Kevin worked as a helicopter mechanic at a nearby Marine Corps base, while Diana had previously worked at her mother's garment factory. However, because she was pregnant, she chose to stay home and prepare for the arrival of her daughter. By the end of September 1979, Diana was close to giving birth and could go into labor at any moment. On the evening of September 30th, after a night of watching a movie together, Diana and her husband had a disagreement. The impending birth of their child was causing them stress and they were constantly arguing. To calm down and avoid escalating the situation, Kevin decided to drive to a nearby fast food restaurant. About 40 minutes later, Kevin contacted the local police department, reporting a heartbreaking situation. His wife had been shot and needed immediate assistance by ambulance. At that time, a patrol car was nearby and the police quickly arrived at the scene. When they entered the apartment, they found Diana lying on the bed in the bedroom, covered in blood, apparently from a head wound similar to a gunshot wound. The bedroom wall was also covered in blood. Diana was showing signs of life, struggling to breathe, so the police began first aid while they waited for the ambulance. They also asked Kevin to leave the room because they were still unsure of what had happened. When paramedics arrived, they carefully loaded Diana into the ambulance for further medical attention. Initially, the paramedics suspected that Diana had been shot, but it was later determined that her injuries were actually blunt force trauma. Kevin wanted to go with his wife, but the police would not allow it. They needed him to give a statement, and at that time, they were investigating every possible scenario, including the possibility that Kevin was involved in the attack. Kevin, in shock, did not understand what the police were saying, even tried to get into the ambulance that was leaving, forcing the police to intervene and stop him. Kevin regained his composure and then explained the events of that night to the police. He had an argument with his wife and decided to leave the apartment to calm down. He drove to a fast food restaurant to buy some burgers. As he left the apartment, he realized he had left his keys inside but decided not to go back to get them. Instead, he closed the door and walked to his car. While driving, he noticed a truck nearby with the back door open. Kevin reported seeing an African-American man parking the truck near their apartment complex. At around 2 a.m., Kevin decided to stop by his favorite fast food joint, but the line was too crowded, which discouraged him. So he chose another location of the same chain nearby. About 40 minutes later, after buying some burgers, he arrived home to find the front door wide open. This was unusual. Kevin rushed inside and heard strange noises. When he entered the bedroom, he was shocked to see Diana lying in a pool of blood and struggling to breathe. Kevin immediately called the police for help. Kevin's story was somewhat confusing and raised many questions. Going out for a burger in the middle of the night seemed unusual. It took him about 40 minutes to make the trip, which was quite long considering all the restaurants were close to his home. The police checked the fast food bag and found the food was still warm. The receipt contained the restaurant's address and time of purchase, which matched Kevin's account. After verifying this, the police allowed Kevin to go to the hospital, but first, they requested a blood sample to compare with traces of blood found at the crime scene. When Diana arrived at the hospital, doctors examined her head wound and determined that it was not caused by a gunshot. Instead, it appeared that her attacker had used a small, heavy object, such as a piece of wood, to hit her multiple times. Diana soon fell into a coma at the hospital, prompting doctors to work urgently to save both her and her unborn child. After several tense hours, they were able to stabilize Diana, but she still needed surgery. During this time, the police asked medical professionals to evaluate whether Diana had been sexually assaulted. The examination was part of standard investigative procedures, and the position in which Diana was found prompted the police to consider the possibility. Experts confirmed that there were traces of semen on her body. However, Kevin told the police that he had had sex with Diana just hours before the argument, and that DNA analysis results were not yet available at that time. Therefore, even with a biological sample from the perpetrator, there was not much that could be done. Kevin and Diana's family waited anxiously at the hospital overnight, hoping that Diana and her baby would pull through. However, in a tragic turn of events, the baby's condition suddenly worsened the next morning. Despite the doctor's best efforts, they were unable to save the baby. Diana underwent emergency surgery shortly after the baby's death and her condition stabilized. Although she remained in a coma, chances of survival were relatively high. And the medical team hope that she can recover and return to normal life after such a serious injury. Meanwhile, the police are trying to identify the person who attacked Diana. After the baby's death, the case was reclassified as a homicide, causing the local police department to allocate all available resources to solve the case. Although Kevin provided an alibi, the police were not quick to rule him out as a suspect. His story raised many questions. He had argued with his wife just hours before the attack, left the front door unlocked, and was absent for an extended period of time during a trip to the fast food restaurant. However, there was no evidence against Kevin. His claim of seeing a suspicious man near his home in the middle of the night led the police to another suspect. About a year before this case, crimes with a similar modus operandi began occurring in and around Tustin. In December 1978, a 17-year-old girl was the victim of a fatal break-in and assault. The perpetrator broke into her apartment, beat her with a wooden object, and sexually assaulted her. 4 months later, a similar case occurred. A 21-year-old woman was killed in her own home after being beaten with a piece of wood by an intruder. In July 1979, an unknown perpetrator broke into another woman's apartment and did the same to her, her injuries leaving her in a coma for several weeks. She eventually recovered. However, her testimony did not provide any new leads for the police to catch the perpetrator. In September 1979, less than a month before Diana's attack, a similar series of events occurred to a 31-year-old woman who died the following day. All of the cases had striking similarities, leading the police to suspect that they were dealing with a serial killer, similar to the one who attacked Diana. The police focused all their efforts on capturing this individual, who had earned the nickname the Bedroom Destroyer. Due to the short time between the cases and the fact that the perpetrator was operating in a relatively small suburb of Los Angeles, the police believed that he might strike again soon. The police decided to issue a public warning through the media, warning all women living alone, especially those living in ground-floor apartments, as they appeared to be the serial killer's primary targets. The announcement caused widespread panic, prompting many women to purchase self-defense products, sign up for self-defense classes, and temporarily move in with friends or family for safety. The police interviewed anyone who might have had any connection to the crimes, and they soon received their first leads. Several of the victims' neighbors reported seeing a suspicious white man with thick black hair near their home. Although the description was vague, the police found several men who matched and investigated them, but got nowhere. 7 days after Diana was attacked, doctors updated her family on her condition. She had regained consciousness, but unfortunately, her recovery was fraught with complications. Diana was unable to speak or recall her memories because her brain functioned at the level of a normal 6-year-old. Her brain needed time to recover. During this time, a similar incident occurred in Tustin. A 24-year-old woman was brutally attacked in her apartment by an unknown assailant who beat her with a wooden object and sexually assaulted her. Sadly, the woman's injuries were fatal. Despite their efforts, the police were unable to arrest the perpetrator. Diana spent several more days in the hospital, and her mind gradually returned to normal. Despite this progress, she still struggled with severe memory loss and could not remember her parents. Doctors informed her family that her memory might recover over time, but they advised against reminding her of anything and instead letting her remember on her own once her health stabilized. When Diana was well enough, she was discharged and her family took her home. Because Kevin had to continue working on the military base to support the family financially, they decided to move in with Diana's parents, who could care for her around the clock. 6 weeks after the attack, Diana was still attending physical therapy sessions and her condition was gradually improving. She still couldn't speak or remember what had happened to her, but that all changed suddenly 6 weeks after the attack. When her therapist brought up the attack and asked if Diana remembered anything about her attacker, Diana responded in surprise, nodding and pointing to her wedding ring, a sudden revelation that took her doctor by surprise. When Diana's mother came to pick her up, the doctor told her about this, and the mother asked her daughter, "Was it Kevin who attacked you?" Diana nodded. Right after that, her mother took her to the police station, where she spoke with the lead detective. He asked Diana a few more questions, and she confirmed that she suddenly remembered the moment of the attack and that the perpetrator was none other than her husband. For the detective, this completely changed the course of the case. He and his team were almost certain that Diana was attacked by the same serial criminal responsible for the other similar attacks. But now the detective faced several questions. Could Kevin be the bedroom basher? He lived in the same area where the attacks happened and even matched the description provided by several witnesses who saw a white man with dark hair. Or did Kevin decide to get rid of his wife by disguising himself as the active killer? Considering that all the actions of the bedroom basher were almost identical each single time, it wouldn't have been difficult. The detective thought that if he arrested Kevin now, his involvement in other crimes might never be proven, and Kevin himself could flee as soon as he realized he was caught. So he made a difficult decision. He asked Diana and her mother to pretend that Diana still remembered nothing and to return home to Kevin. This was obviously a huge challenge for both of them, but they agreed nonetheless. Investigators put Kevin under surveillance and closely monitored all his movements, hoping to eventually link him to other attacks. Police spoke with Kevin's friends to learn more about the suspect. And they quickly found out something interesting. Those who knew him well said that his relationship with Diana was quite tense. The couple argued frequently, a fact also confirmed by neighbors who often heard their screams. According to friends, Kevin regularly complained to them that Diana refused to be intimate with him in the final months of her pregnancy. Yet Kevin had described his relationship with Diana to detectives as nearly perfect. But besides that, detectives couldn't gather any additional useful information. Kevin behaved quite normally. He went to work and came back home without lingering anywhere else and didn't raise any suspicions. The police also received results from the lab revealing an interesting discovery. Besides the attacker's semen, they found skin particles with blood under Diana's nails. Specialists matched the blood type of the attacker to Kevin's blood sample, and it matched. It meant that Kevin had the same blood type as the person who attacked Diana. Based on this information, detectives came up with the most likely version of what had happened on that fateful night. Kevin indeed bought burgers at a fast food joint a few miles from home. The time on the receipt and cashier's words confirmed his presence. So, the detectives believed he could have attacked Diana before leaving home, then quickly went to the fast food restaurant to create an alibi explaining the extended 40-minute trip. Regarding motive, detectives theorized that Diana's refusal to engage in intimacy served as the trigger. Despite Kevin's claim that they had had sex hours before the incident, he frequently complained to friends about Diana's reluctance for months. Given the severity of the attack, detectives believed this was Kevin's breaking point. The police re-interviewed Diana, who confirmed she vividly remembered the attack and that Kevin was indeed the one who assaulted her. During the conversation, her mother said they could no longer pretend and live under the same roof as Kevin. The police decided to arrest Kevin without arresting him at Diana's home to avoid endangering her family. Instead, they arrested him at a store. Despite his arrest, Kevin maintained his innocence, claiming that everything happened exactly as he told them. As the trial proceeded, preparations took nearly 10 months to complete. During this time, Diana's health gradually improved, allowing her to regain her ability to speak, albeit with some difficulty. Diana was examined by multiple doctors, all of whom agreed that her brain had recovered and that she was now a credible witness. In court, Diana positively identified her husband as her attacker that night. However, Kevin's defense team argued that he was innocent, claiming that he was at a fast food restaurant at the time of the incident. Unfortunately for Kevin, Diana's testimony was stronger than his alibi, resulting in a guilty verdict. As a result, in November 1980, Kevin was convicted of murdering his child and assaulting Diana. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. In the wake of Kevin's possible involvement in the serial killings, the police noticed something interesting. Before Kevin was arrested, there had been 2 more similar cases in their county. But both victims survived. They had not yet been able to identify the attacker, so his identity remained unknown. But after Kevin was arrested, the attack suddenly stopped. Before that, the bedroom wrecker had committed crimes quite frequently, sometimes only a few weeks apart. However, after Kevin was arrested, there were no more similar cases. After the verdict, Diana filed for divorce, and Kevin did not object. Diana then focused on recovering her health, but her progress was slow due to the severity of her injuries. She lost some of her hearing and vision, and she was having difficulty speaking. Meanwhile, Kevin never gave up on his claim of innocence, even after many years had passed. However, life in prison was extremely difficult for him. Fellow inmates often targeted him because he was convicted of murdering a child, which led to him being hospitalized several times. Kevin applied for parole but was denied by the board. He continued to receive 3 more denials in the following years. The main reason for these decisions was Kevin's refusal to plead guilty, which was seen as a lack of remorse. When DNA analysis became a standard tool in forensic science, Kevin requested that his DNA be compared to existing samples. However, his request was denied because he could not afford the analysis. In 1996, the police department reopened the investigation into a series of attacks believed to have been committed by the bedroom basher. During this time, semen samples taken from the victims' bodies were stored in a laboratory. Now, the police had a chance to identify the perpetrator behind all of these crimes. Kevin was still considered the prime suspect, but DNA analysis revealed something surprising. When experts compared the DNA profile, the semen samples matched the DNA of another man, a man named Gerald Parker. Gerald was arrested the same year as Kevin. His crime involved the attack on a 13-year-old girl in Tustin, and he was arrested shortly thereafter. Initially, the police did not link this case to the other series of attacks because of the different attack methods. The bedroom basher typically targeted his victims at night while they were in their apartments, while Parker attacked the girl on the street. He has since served his sentence in prison and is expected to be released in a few days. After police got a DNA match for Gerald in the unsolved cases, they re-examined the Diana attack. Although the crime was considered solved, police still considered Diana's case to be connected to the serial killer cases. They now understood that Kevin was definitely not a serial killer, leaving them with only one question: did he really attack his wife? Gerald was stationed at the same military base as Kevin and owned a dark-colored truck during that time. Notably, on the day of the incident, Kevin reported to police that he saw an African-American man near a dark-colored truck outside their home. This statement led police to consider the possibility that Parker may have been involved in the attack on Diana. The local prosecutor visited Kevin in prison and updated him on the progress of the bedroom basher murder investigation. During the visit, the prosecutor asked Kevin to provide a direct DNA sample for analysis. Kevin, who had been trying to do this for years, immediately agreed. While the experts were analyzing Kevin's DNA, the police went to see Gerald in prison. At that time, they had not yet charged him with the series of attacks, because they needed time to prepare such a complex case. However, the police decided to talk to Gerald, hoping that he might confess. Gerald initially denied any involvement in the series of crimes. To get more information, the police changed the subject and asked him about the attack on Diana. Before proceeding with the interrogation, they reviewed his file and discovered an important detail. After being arrested for attacking the girl, he told the police that military service was the best thing that had ever happened to him. The police took advantage of this information, questioning how he could have let another soldier take responsibility for his crimes. They continued to pressure him by appealing to his loyalty to the army. This strategy eventually yielded a breakthrough when Gerald surprisingly revealed that another man was actually serving time for the murder he had committed. Gerald admitted that he had driven to Kevin's house in his truck that night. His intention was to explore the neighborhood in his truck, looking into ground floor windows for potential victims, as he had done many times before. However, when he arrived, he heard screaming coming from Kevin and Diana's apartment, and when a man walked out, Gerald noticed that the man had left the door unlocked when he left. After waiting for a few minutes, Gerald entered the apartment and attacked Diana. He said he had not known Diana's husband before, as they had been on different assignments at the military base. Gerald confessed to several crimes, including 6 murders and 3 non-fatal assaults, in addition to the crimes for which Kevin had been wrongly convicted. DNA testing confirmed Gerald's guilt and Kevin's innocence, supporting Gerald's confession. The prosecutor promised to overturn his conviction as soon as possible, and a few days later, Kevin was released after 16 years in prison. The development caused public outrage, not only because an innocent man had been wrongly imprisoned for nearly half his life, but also because it took the police so long to identify the real culprit. After Kevin was released, the state of California paid him $10,000 in restitution. A few years later, he received an additional $100 per day payment for his time in prison, totaling $620,000. But the story doesn't end there. Even though Kevin was completely exonerated, Diana still refused to believe in his innocence. Up until that point, she had claimed that Kevin was the only one who attacked her. However, after biological material from her body matched Gerald's DNA, she came up with a different story. Diana said she was attacked and assaulted by Kevin, who then left, followed by Gerald. However, Gerald claimed that when he entered the apartment, Diana was lying on the bed without any injuries or signs of distress, and he admitted to hitting her on the head. Diana's family offered another explanation. Kevin may have colluded with Gerald to commit the crime, which would explain why Kevin left the house with the door open. Gerald, on the other hand, repeatedly denied knowing Kevin, pointing out that the military base was home to many people who did not know each other. Kevin also insisted that he had nothing to do with Gerald and vowed that he would never harm Diana or their unborn child. He insisted that his only mistake was leaving the door open because he did not want to go back to get the keys immediately after an argument with his wife, a decision that still haunts him. Diana maintained her version of events, and one reason may have been the severe trauma she suffered during the attack. The trauma had a profound impact on her brain. When Diana awoke from her coma, doctors advised her family not to inform her of what had happened, as her brain was extremely sensitive to new information at that time. She would treat any details provided as real and accurate memories. It is worth noting that even at the time of Kevin's release, 16 years after the incident, she continued to experience severe post-traumatic stress. This suggests that the effects of the trauma had affected her brain beyond repair. It is also possible that the trauma was the main reason she convicted Kevin of involvement. Gerald Parker was sentenced to death in 1999, but the death penalty has not yet been carried out. Instead, due to California's moratorium on the death penalty, Gerald remains in prison to serve his sentence. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Karen Newell. Sunday evening, February 20th, 1994, on a desolate rural road in Orange County, Florida, between Cocoa Beach and Orlando. A car was parked on the side of the road, and a woman was frantically waving her arms at passing vehicles. When a driver finally stopped, she pleaded for help. In the car's headlights, a man could be seen bleeding in the passenger seat. A woman named Karen Newell was trying to save her husband, John Newell, who had been shot multiple times but was still alive. Karen asked the driver for a phone and urgently called 911, screaming that her husband was dying. Within minutes, a deputy sheriff arrived, followed by police and paramedics, but it was too late for John. He needed a forensic expert, not medical assistance. He died before help could arrive, and all the doctors could do was confirm his death from multiple gunshot wounds. They immediately began communicating with Karen about the tragic situation. Karen recounted that they were attacked while returning home to Orlando after a day at the beach. On the way back, their cars started having problems that she couldn't understand. Her husband asked her to pull over to the side of the road to check the issue. As Karen got out and opened the hood, a small sedan parked right next to them. Inside were three men who looked threatening. One detail she remembered was a sticker on the rear window that said "Bad Boy." The men got out of their car without noticing Karen, who was focused on the engine. She watched as one of them approached her husband's window and demanded his wallet. Her husband refused and tried to defend himself. During the struggle, one of the attackers pulled out a gun and shot him multiple times. Afterward, the men jumped back into their car and drove away. Fortunately, Karen was unharmed. She quickly ran to John, who was bleeding. She felt helpless and couldn't do anything to save him. Karen Newell was originally from Florida and had faced a difficult life filled with cruelty since childhood. Despite these challenges, she maintained a cheerful and energetic spirit, enjoying parties and socializing with her many friends throughout high school. As she blossomed into a beautiful young woman, heads turned wherever she went, but this did not lead to a happy family life. After graduating, she experienced several unsuccessful relationships and, by her 20th birthday, had been married twice, with both marriages ending in divorce. Nevertheless, she hopeful. That spring, she focused on advancing her career. Previously, she had held various accounting jobs and worked as a nurse in a private clinic. This charming brunette even entered beauty contests, hoping to launch a modeling career, but luck was not on her side in those pursuits. One evening, she walked into a bar in one of Orlando's suburbs. There, she found a friendly stranger sitting alone with a drink. He was John, a respected local mechanic who owned a car repair shop. Just before their meeting, John had gone through a difficult breakup with his first wife, a Navy nurse who had just returned home from a long business trip. She told him she was seeing someone else, which was why he went to the bar that night. When Karen saw him, she felt an immediate attraction. Confident and outgoing, she approached him, sat down next to him, and began chatting. She discovered that he was the owner of a popular auto repair shop, young, successful, and attractive. Their brief encounter quickly developed into a passionate night. John then fell in love with Karen, and she felt the same. Their relationship flourished rapidly, and just 2 months after their intense night together, they got married on May 22, 1993. The newlyweds appeared genuinely happy, surrounded by a wave of love and joy. Shortly after their wedding, Karen's modeling prospects improved, thanks to her husband's connections and her regular participation in beauty contests. She landed a well-paying television job, leading to a busy schedule that often kept her away for several days. Despite John's worries about losing Karen like he lost his first wife, she reassured him that she would never betray him. She reminded him that their sacrifices would eventually pay off, and together they dreamed of retiring in 5 years, free from work and worry. However, just a few months after their wedding, Karen discovered she was pregnant. The couple was thrilled. John's desire for a large family seemed within reach, and they continued to support each other through this exciting new chapter. A few days after Valentine's Day, they planned a weekend getaway to the beach in Florida to relax after a busy week. On February 20th, John and Karen packed their bags and drove to Cocoa Beach, located on the east side of Orlando. Known for its stunning views and excellent surfing, they spent the entire day enjoying the beach, having a barbecue, swimming, and before leaving, stopped by a surf shop to buy some gear. After that, they packed their belongings and headed home. Karen was driving because her husband had consumed some alcohol earlier and wanted to avoid losing his license. John sat in the front passenger seat. They passed through a toll booth and entered the state highway. At this time, her husband was adjusting the radio, which wasn't functioning properly. Suddenly, the car skidded slightly. Karen mentioned to her husband that the car felt odd, and she noticed a strong vibration in the steering wheel. They decided to pull over and investigate, but then the attack occurred. John was shot multiple times while sitting in the passenger seat of the car. The police conducted a detailed search for the attackers. Using Karen's testimony, they were able to create a detailed description of the car, noting one key detail: a sticker on the rear window. Karen later reported feeling unwell. She was pregnant, so emergency services rushed her to the hospital to ensure her and her baby's safety. 2.40 caliber shell casings were found near the car, indicating that the men were dangerous criminals. They were armed with at least one handgun. Surprisingly, they fled so quickly that they forgot to take the victim's wallet. Police alerted neighboring counties, notified all available patrols, and warned drivers of passing cars. Checkpoints were set up, with officers carefully monitoring vehicles. Initially, attention was focused on cars with bad boy stickers. However, no drivers reported seeing such a car, and it did not pass through the checkpoints. In the ambulance, Karen answered all the necessary questions about the incident. However, the health of the Karen and child was the main priority at that time. After being examined at the hospital, doctors confirmed that the Karen was in stable condition. She was able to speak with police officers later that same day. Karen provided a detailed account of the events. She explained that they were not alone on the beach. A friend from work, Peter, joined them shortly after they arrived at Cocoa Beach. The three of them spent most of the day together, and at the end of the day, they drove back to Orlando in 2 separate cars. Peter drove his own car while Karen followed him closely behind. After passing the toll booth, Peter drove ahead and quickly vanished from view. Soon after, Karen's car began to vibrate. Her husband insisted they stop immediately to check the car's condition. Karen got out of the driver's seat and opened the hood. Suddenly, she heard the screech of brakes as a stranger's car pulled up near theirs. Just seconds later, gunfire erupted. In that moment, Karen crouched down to hide under the open hood. She overheard the attackers, dressed in black and white, demanding her husband's wallet. Then, several loud shots rang out, and the criminals fled the scene. She noticed that the robbers didn't take the wallet, but she couldn't see their faces. The police arrived quickly and began investigating the scene, exploring various possibilities. Some unusual aspects caught their attention, raising doubts about Karen's statement. First, no one reported seeing a car marked Bad Boy. Second, it seemed odd that the robbers, who were after a wallet for money, would leave abruptly and forget their loot after committing murder. Third, they overlooked the woman and didn't check why the car's hood was open. Finally, it was odd that John, a mechanic, didn't check under the hood himself, while the one checking the car was Karen, who didn't know much about cars. The police did not charge Karen with fraud. Instead, they chose to gather more details about the case. The police quickly found some interesting information, specifically a report from 3 months earlier in Orlando. It turned out that an assault had occurred at Karen's home. According to the couple's previous statements, at around 9 p.m., Karen heard a noise in their backyard. She told her husband about it and asked him to check it out. When John went outside, he encountered 2 masked men. The neighbor quickly left the house when he heard the noise, and the porch light suddenly turned on, scaring the attackers, so they ran away. John returned home and told his wife what had happened, and she called the rescue service. John was not seriously injured, but he had a lot of bruises. John had no valuable information that could help catch the criminals, since he could not see their faces. After a brief and unsuccessful search, John's family's case was declared unsolved. John believed that he had interrupted the robbers, leading to their attack on his home. However, things now seemed more serious. He may have inadvertently made enemies, and they had come back to destroy him. This also explained why they did not take his wallet. Their goal was never to steal, but to kill him. The police started investigating all the people that John might have had conflicts with recently. John ran a successful business, raising the question of whether competitors could resort to extreme actions. Most of John's friends and acquaintances were unaware of any conflicts. John was known to be a kind and non-confrontational person, never speaking about any unpleasant situations that might cause resentment towards him. Everyone agreed that he was always willing to help others. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that John's kind nature may have contributed to the tragedy. Police discovered that shortly before the attack, a stranger had appeared in John's backyard. He was identified as Peter, a friend of Karen's who had recently gone on vacation with their family John. Peter's apartment had been broken into, forcing him to seek temporary housing. Karen convinced John to allow Peter to stay in her home for a while to support him during this difficult time. Peter is an attractive young man with blonde hair and blue eyes. After new discoveries in the investigation, there is growing suspicion that Karen has feelings for Peter, and that Peter is likely the father of the child. It is possible that the couple planned to eliminate John in order to benefit financially from their relationship. Peter, who had a close relationship with Karen, became a suspect in the murder investigation. He was brought to the police station for questioning. During the interview, Peter's account matched what Karen had said. He confirmed that he had gone to Cocoa Beach with Karen's family and spent time there with them, drinking beer and smoking marijuana. That evening, he drove away after passing through a checkpoint, not waiting for Karen's family because he was on his way home to Port St. Lucie. Overall, his story was consistent with Karen's account. He provided detailed information about his background to counter any claims about an affair with Karen. At that moment, it became clear that Karen had lied. She had claimed that Peter was an assistant producer at a TV channel where she worked, but that was false. In reality, Peter did not have a steady job. He had dropped out of school and occasionally did part-time work like mowing lawns. This allowed him to make enough money to get by, but he was not involved in any television work. Police learned from Peter's friends that Karen had been having an affair with Peter, which began a few months before he moved into John's house. During this time, Peter often bragged about his relationship with a married woman and often shared the story of how they met. It was later revealed that Karen had used business trips as an excuse to spend time with Peter. At the time, Karen was 29 and Peter was 18. While Karen kept the relationship a secret, she often visited him in the city, where they enjoyed days together and spent John's money. They met by chance while driving on the highway. The Karen caught his attention with her handcuff keychain hanging from her rearview mirror. When they stopped at a traffic light, he happily stuck his hands out the window as if they were handcuffed. To his surprise, she smiled back and they began flirting. After their first meeting, they spent the night together on the beach. His friends noticed that Peter was very fond of Karen. He even talked seriously about marrying her and was convinced that she might be pregnant with his child. The couple had a clear motive for killing John. However, at this stage of the investigation, there was no concrete evidence to confirm their involvement. The first step was to locate the murder weapon. A .22 caliber pistol was found at the crime scene. Police are looking for witnesses who may know about Peter and Karen's weapons. They interviewed one of the Karen's ex-husbands, who revealed that Peter was not Karen's only sexual partner. She often meets with her ex in various hotels. In November 1993, she approached him with an unusual request to borrow a .22 caliber pistol for self-defense, claiming she felt threatened after two strangers attacked John. He believed her and provided her with the weapon, which raised suspicions. It is necessary to locate the pistol and conduct ballistics testing to determine whether John was shot with this gun. When the police asked Karen's ex-husband about the weapon, he reported that she had not yet returned it. This raised the police's suspicions about Karen's involvement in her husband's death. As they investigated her background, they discovered that she was on probation at the time. In the 1980s, Karen had been convicted of credit card forgery and large-scale theft. Because of her probation status, she was not allowed to possess the weapon given to her by her ex-husband. Consequently, just 8 days after John's death, Karen was arrested for violating her probation, which meant she would remain in custody until the investigation was finished. Police quickly received crucial evidence just 2 days after the arrest. They interviewed Louis Aragon, Karen's half-brother. Louis had a criminal history. In the summer of 1993, Karen approached him with a proposition. Her husband had a $500,000 life insurance policy, and Karen wanted him to help eliminate John. In exchange, she promised him a large payout. However, despite the tempting offer, Louis refused to participate in the murder. In November, Peter and Karen planned to brutally beat John in their yard over a money dispute. Fortunately, a neighbor intervened in time and scared the attackers away, which angered Karen, who had begun to plan how to get rid of her troublesome husband. Key to the investigation was the testimony of her half-brother, Louis. He revealed that Karen had approached him just days after the first attack and tried to convince him to participate in a second murder, but he had refused. Peter, however, was willing to do anything for Karen. As Thanksgiving approached in 1993, Karen convinced her husband to allow Peter to live with them. The police needed to verify the truthfulness of their new witness. They started by reviewing the couple's insurance policies. They discovered that Karen had taken out a life insurance policy on her husband for $250,000, which was stored in his safe. Over time, she acquired several additional policies, totaling around $500,000, a significant sum at that time. It appeared that her greed led her to eliminate her husband in order to collect the insurance payouts. Karen was determined to receive the money. In the days following John's death, she contacted various insurance companies, and some had already issued her compensation by the time of the investigation. However, the largest payments were on hold, prompting Karen to visit multiple insurance companies to demand her money. Meanwhile, on March 28, 1994, Peter was arrested as well. Both were charged with John Newell's murder. The prosecutor's office alleges that from the beginning, Karen began her relationship with John with the intention of receiving his insurance money. After getting married, she quickly took out a $250,000 life insurance policy and continued to purchase smaller policies. However, she did not directly participate in any crimes. Instead, she manipulated Peter and convinced him that they would marry and have a child together, portraying her husband, John, as an obstacle to their future. After the murder, a pregnancy test was conducted and it was found that she was not pregnant. She had an IUD, preventing any possibility of pregnancy at the time. Karen was fully aware of this. It was clear that her claim of being pregnant was simply a manipulation tactic to control the men around her. Given her deceitful nature, the prosecutor's office was aiming for the death penalty. And Peter was also facing the death penalty. So it was easy to get a confession by offering a deal. The plea agreement included cross-examination, during which Peter quickly admitted to having an affair with Karen. He claimed that they had been intimate at every meeting. She had won his heart. Peter revealed that it was Karen who had suggested attacking John in his apartment. When that plan failed, Karen began planning a more elaborate crime. As soon as Peter got out of the car, he pointed a gun at John's head and fired 3 more bullets into John's chest. Peter then dumped the gun in a lake several miles from the crime scene. Divers were able to recover the gun, and ballistics tests confirmed that it was the same gun that had shot John Newell. Additionally, the gun's serial number matched the serial number registered to Karen's ex-husband. In exchange for this crucial information, Peter was offered a plea deal for second-degree murder instead of first-degree murder. During the preliminary hearing, it was clear that Karen's lawyers were determined to fight hard. They tried to blame Peter, arguing that he was the mastermind behind the crime, motivated by jealousy over. Karen was portrayed as an innocent victim caught in the love triangle. If Karen was not involved in planning the murder, then how did Peter get the gun that her ex-husband owned? She never gave a satisfactory explanation for this. In addition, Peter and Karen's ex-husband did not know each other. The ex-husband even confirmed that Karen asked him for a gun. On September 5, 1994, Peter was sentenced to a long prison term with the possibility of parole, and he was released in early January 2010. And Karen Newell was sentenced to life in prison. She complained that it was unfair that Peter, who pulled the trigger, received a lighter sentence than she. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Kelly Lane. Kelly Lane was an Australian beauty and a champion water polo athlete. Despite her success, she faced a series of unfortunate events that led to tragedy, leaving many unanswered questions about her story. Born in 1975, Kelly grew up in a sports-oriented family. Her father, originally known as Bim, later became a police officer named Robert Lane. Her mother, Sandra, worked in a medical institution and coached water polo. Kelly had a brother named Morgan. The family was affluent and lived in a prestigious area of Sydney, Australia. Kelly was a golden child, attending Lee High School and later Mayclara. After graduating, she enrolled at the University of Newcastle to study art and then attended the Australian College of Physical Education. During this time, she started her sports career, working as a physical education teacher and coach at a girls' high school. Following in her mother's footsteps, Kelly became a highly skilled water polo player, which made her famous in her city. Her parents were proud of her accomplishments and were themselves respected professionals. Kelly took part in almost all public events, especially sports-related ones, and had a bright future ahead. Her mother was both her coach and manager, dedicating a lot of time to Kelly's career. Initially, Sandra personally handled her daughter's training, but later Kelly was coached by a more experienced trainer. Kelly dedicated herself completely to sports. Her parents were supportive and actively helped her progress in her chosen path. Despite her hectic schedule, Kelly was calm and reserved. She had a fit, athletic body and natural beauty, seldom wearing makeup. Her attractiveness and sociable nature made her popular even in high school. In 1992, when she was finishing her studies, Kelly met Aaron. They had a lot in common and their relationship developed into a romance. At the age of 17, she unexpectedly became pregnant while still in school and, not ready to become a mother, she chose to have an abortion. Aaron supported her decision. In order to continue her athletic career, Kelly kept her pregnancy and abortion a secret, never telling her parents. By early 1994, Kelly's relationship with Aaron ended due to frequent arguments. She then began an affair with a married man and became pregnant at 19, despite using contraception. She did not plan to keep the child and decided to have another abortion. This decision was made in secret, as the father did not want the child either. Kelly sought a different clinic for more confidentiality but was initially refused because the pregnancy was too advanced for a safe procedure. She had to convince the doctors to perform the surgery and they finally agreed. At that time, she was in her 20th week of pregnancy. Remarkably, during 5 months of intense training, no one noticed her condition because athletes often endure challenging situations. Kelly, determined to participate in the Olympic Games, did not show weakness or ask for special treatment. Her athleticism helped her maintain a fit appearance, aided by loose clothing. Sometimes, a woman's body structure can conceal a pregnancy until later stages, as was the case with Kelly. Although the abortion was traumatic, she felt relieved to have resolved the situation and continued with her life, pursuing sports and forming new relationships. In 1995, Kelly started dating a new boyfriend named Duncan, and they were together until 1998. Duncan professed his deep love for Kelly and expressed a desire to marry her. Both were athletes who enjoyed parties and entertainment. During this time, Kelly became pregnant again with an unwanted child. After her previous traumatic abortion, she was reluctant to seek medical help. Despite being pregnant, Kelly still chose to compete in sports and compete in the World Cup. Practicing a demanding sport like water polo while pregnant is no easy feat, yet Kelly managed it. Despite the intense physical demands, no one noticed the strain she was under, not even her boyfriend on the team, as Kelly kept her pregnancy a secret. To maintain her privacy, she wore a towel to the pool and only removed it before entering the water, avoiding showing her figure in a swimsuit by wearing loose clothing. Her boyfriend remained unaware but later recalled that she never let him touch her stomach and had limited contact with him. Around the 7th month of her pregnancy, an unexpected situation occurred. During practice, a swimmer in the water next to Kelly noticed her protruding belly and suspected that she might be pregnant. The swimmer shared her suspicions with her coach. Kelly's coach then asked her about it. Kelly firmly denied being pregnant, and the coach, upon seeing her small belly, was reassured. Kelly continued to lie, fearing that it would ruin her athletic career. Kelly was participating in a local water polo event. During the event, she felt unwell and was taken to hospital on a stretcher, where she gave birth to a baby girl. She experienced severe contractions, which likely began during the competition. After the birth, Kelly abandoned the baby, who was later adopted. She even named another man as the father. Despite this, Kelly was forced to stay in the hospital with the baby until she was discharged. She did not inform her family about the birth, telling her parents that she was with friends, which they believed. No one was worried about her, allowing her to carry out her plan. On her birthday, she managed to leave the hospital to have a drink with friends. She became intoxicated. After returning from the party, at the beginning of the year, Kelly began working as a teacher at a private school. She also continued her water polo career, representing Australia at the World Championships in Canada. Kelly performed well and won a silver medal. When Kelly turned 21, she became pregnant again. Despite being pregnant, Kelly maintained a romantic relationship with Duncan, who was deeply in love and considering marriage. However, she chose to keep her pregnancy a secret from her family, friends, and Duncan, even though they had been together for a long time and he was eager to marry her. Throughout her pregnancy, Kelly did not show any physical signs. She remained slim and did not alter her lifestyle. She regularly consumed alcohol, attended parties, engaged in intimate relationships, and continued to exercise vigorously, just as she always had. In a small suburb where everyone knew each other, Kelly faced the challenge of being the subject of gossip during her pregnancies. Many people envied her and suspected something was wrong, fueling rumors about her condition. This suspicion was partly due to changes in her behavior, like wearing towels or loose-fitting clothes. While those close to her didn't notice anything unusual, some outsiders found it odd. Regardless, Kelly consistently denied any rumors about being pregnant, insisting she was fine, and no one challenged her assertions, as there was no proof to suggest otherwise. In April 1996, Kelly's relationship with Duncan began to deteriorate. He moved to a different area and bought a house, creating distance between them. Later, Kelly discovered that he had cheated on her with one of the athletes on her team. Although this betrayal hurt her, Kelly chose to forgive him and work to save their relationship. On September 12, in the year 1996, Kelly secretly gave birth to her second daughter, whom she named Tegan. She had informed her relatives that she would be spending the weekend with friends, but instead, she went to the hospital to give birth. Kelly chose a hospital far from home, reducing the risk of encountering someone she knew. For the first time during her pregnancy, she used her real name and date of birth at the hospital. She even considered keeping the baby. However, she later changed her address and phone number. At the time, it was relatively easy to hide or change personal information. Australians had access to free health care, including anonymous services if needed. Unlike her previous children, baby Tegan felt the warmth of her mother, indicating that a bond had formed between them. Kelly spent time with her daughter, breastfeeding, bathing and sleeping together. During her labor, she consulted with doctors about her future as a mother. Unlike before, she tried to avoid or abandon her child. Just 2 days after giving birth, Kelly and her daughter were discharged from hospital. However, she missed an important test required in Australia, which involves taking blood from the baby's heel for newborn screening. The early discharge was necessary because of a lack of beds in the hospital. Both Kelly and her daughter felt well and were quickly discharged to make room for other patients. On the day she was discharged from the hospital, Kelly left home between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m., and no one saw the baby again. She returned to her parents' house around 3 p.m. without her daughter. Since no one knew she had given birth, there were no suspicions or questions about her absence. That evening, she met her boyfriend and went out to a family wedding where she acted normally as if nothing had happened. Her behavior raised no concerns among her relatives. For the next 10 years, no one suspected the existence of Tegan. The baby had vanished during the time between leaving the hospital and arriving at her parents' home. Since only Kelly and the doctors were aware of the baby's existence, no one searched for Tegan. The doctors did not follow up on the baby's fate, so the information remained hidden. At the end of 1998, Kelly became pregnant again due to her carelessness. By the time she discovered her pregnancy, she had already broken up with her boyfriend, Duncan. This time, she decided not to tell anyone and wanted to have an abortion. In early February 1999, she visited the new abortion clinic in Queensland. However, her request for an abortion was denied because she arrived at the clinic in the 25th week of her pregnancy, which was too late for the procedure. She faced similar refusals at other clinics, leaving her with no choice but to give birth. Kelly secretly gave birth in the hospital and immediately put the baby up for adoption. By that time, the laws regarding adoption had changed, making the process more complicated. She spoke briefly with a social worker about her lack of documents. Kelly lied, claiming it was her first birth, and provided her real name but gave false information about her contact details and address. She also stated that she did not know who the child's father was. Because of the incorrect information she provided, the social worker's job became much more difficult. When the organization that assists new mothers reviewed her case, they realized they had been misled and that this was not Kelly's first birth. They began searching for her to discuss the situation, as they lacked the necessary information to legally finalize the adoption of the child. The adoption process in the country has changed significantly, but Kelly was not aware of this. Consequently, the social workers handling the adoption paperwork performed a thorough background check on the child's biological mother. As they investigated her history and life, they uncovered numerous inconsistencies and falsehoods. They investigated Kelly's situation and found that she likely had a daughter named Tegan, whom she had given birth to several years earlier. Kelly did not abandon Tegan, she left the hospital with her. However, the only information available was that Tegan was born in a hospital near Bern. After leaving the hospital, there was no communication from Kelly. She never Tegan took for checkups, vaccinations, or visits to the pediatrician. For 3 years, there were no updates about the child, and Kelly's biological mother denied that Kelly had ever given birth. This situation raised alarms, leading social services employees to reach out to Kelly's mother. She confidently insisted that they were mistaken and claimed she had no grandchildren. However, the social workers suspected something was wrong and contacted the police, who began their investigation. Meanwhile, Kelly went about her life, unaware that the police were getting closer to uncovering her secrets. In 2000, on her 25th birthday, it was revealed that she was pregnant again, and this time she chose to keep the child. For the first time, she shared this news with her family and boyfriend. This decision was likely influenced by Kelly's sports career, as she was aging and had stopped competing. Kelly tried to work as a coach and present herself as a respectable mother, which was beneficial for her at that time. However, she was unaware that the investigation into the disappearance of baby Tegan was intensifying. Later, police reached out to her regarding her previous pregnancies, and Kelly was summoned for questioning. This time, she could not evade it, as police had already gathered extensive information about her. Kelly admitted to 5 pregnancies, including those that were terminated, between the ages of 17 and 24. She had 2 abortions and gave birth to 3 children, all without her family's knowledge. She stated that Tegan was born from a secret relationship with an older man named Andrew Morris. Kelly met Andrew on Vis Beach Street, where he worked in finance, and they connected in a bar. Their relationship was short-lived. When Kelly discovered she was pregnant and shared the news with Andrew, he was excited and awaited the birth. She claimed that after the baby was born, Andrew took Tegan but did not clarify where they would live. Kelly was unable to provide further details about Andrew. Nevertheless, a portrait was created based on her description for the investigation. The police began by checking their records, with the initial goal of finding the baby's father, Andrew, to find out where the child was. The police were stumped because they could not find any men matching Kelly's description. The potential matches were either too young or too old, and no one by that name lived on Bibbich Street, which cast doubt on Kelly's story. They eventually discovered an Andrew Morris, who had previously been in a relationship with Kelly, but that was years before her child was born. When the police contacted him, he confirmed that he had not seen Kelly for a long time and did not have any children with her. He had moved away a long time ago and had never lived at the address Kelly had provided. A month later, the investigation hit a temporary pause because there were no new leads on the child. However, a new police took over the case, and Kelly was called in for questioning again. She recounted the same story she had shared with the previous police, but some details had changed, and which the new police noticed. For instance, the father's last name had suddenly shifted from Andrew Morris to Andrew Norris. With a friendly smile, Kelly claimed she might have made a mistake during the earlier questioning and now remembered the correct last name, which confused the police. They directly asked her if she had killed her daughter. Kelly was surprised and denied it, asking to stop the audio recording of the interrogation. She was clearly distressed, mainly worried about how discussing her pregnancy might impact her career. However, there wasn't enough evidence to charge her, so the Kelly was released, and the investigation continued. Police, after considerable effort, were unable to locate Andrew Norris. However, they were unable to find any men matching Kelly's description, nor were there any children resembling Tegan enrolled in schools or kindergartens in the Minley area or surrounding communities. Police sifted through some 86,000 birth records in an attempt to identify potential adoptive parents for the child, but they found no new leads. Despite Kelly's increasing dishonesty, she continued to mislead the police. She said she saw Tegan 1-year-old in mid-1997, but no one could confirm her claim. Despite this, the police remained optimistic and continued their investigation. They contacted Kelly's ex-boyfriend, Duncan, as her relationship with him coincided with the clandestine relationship that led to Tegan's birth. Duncan maintains that he did not know about Kelly's affair. Duncan suspected that Kelly was pregnant, but she never mentioned it to him. He noticed that she never let him touch her belly, though he didn't think much of it at the time. They lived apart and only saw each other occasionally. He willingly agreed to provide his DNA for testing. The results showed that he was not the biological father of Kelly's first or third child, as both were adopted by other families. Unfortunately, the police did not have DNA samples from the missing baby, so they couldn't confirm if Duncan was the father of Tegan. Connecting all the data to confirm Tegan's existence was a challenge because information about the mother and baby was incomplete and inaccurate, making the investigation even more difficult. While the police worked to solve the mystery and find the Tegan, Kelly continued her life without concern. During this time, rumors spread around town that Kelly had multiple abortions, had children, and abandoned them. These rumors damaged her coaching career and damaged her reputation. Kelly eventually gave birth to a baby girl, whom she chose to keep, and she introduced her to all her relatives. In 2004, to help restore her reputation, she married the father of her fourth child. The police were unable to get any information about Tegan's father, Andrew Norris. Kelly frequently changed her story, which caused the police to lose confidence in her. The case stalled and they offered Kelly a deal. If she pleaded guilty to the child's murder and revealed where the body was buried, she would not face any charges and could avoid jail time. Despite these terms, Kelly maintained her innocence, claiming that she did not kill the child. She claimed that the child was still alive and suggested that both the child's and the father's names may have been changed, or that they may have left the country and are now untraceable. She believed that this was the reason why the police had been unable to locate them. The police found the scenario unlikely. Why would Andrew change both his name and Tegan's if he hadn't kidnapped her? He could have simply taken his daughter away from her mother and updated the necessary paperwork, enrolling her in a nursery, school, or hospital. Why did he remain in hiding for so many years? There is no clear reason for this. The situation was further complicated by a ban on sharing information about the case, which prevented police from seeking help from the media or the public. When Kelly declined a plea bargain and police failed to investigate for years, they concluded that Tegan was dead and the case was treated as a murder. They also deemed Andrew to be a fictitious person. However, there was no solid evidence supporting these claims. Despite the absence of direct evidence or testimony against Kelly, she was charged with Tegan's murder on November 17, 2009. Kelly maintained her innocence, and the case was referred to court. The prosecution claims that Tegan's murder occurred on September 14, 1996, the day Kelly was discharged from the hospital. Shortly after leaving, the baby went missing. The Kelly had very little time to commit the crime and dispose of the body. To protect her social status and image, Kelly hid her pregnancy and discarded the baby. She returned home the same day as if nothing had happened, met her boyfriend, and went to celebrate a relative's wedding. During the trial, Kelly maintained her innocence. Her first boyfriend, Aaron, supported her and they rekindled their relationship after her divorce. He shared that it was difficult for them to decide to terminate her pregnancy the first time, and it was a difficult healing process for Kelly, leading him to believe that she was not capable of murder. However, he did not know that she later had another abortion and gave birth to the children she abandoned. In front of the jury, the prosecutor had no concrete evidence, witnesses, or bodies. Only circumstantial evidence against her. Prosecutors described Kelly as a dangerous, manipulative person who would do anything to get what she wanted. Her ability to abandon her children raised suspicions about her capacity to kill. A psychiatrist confirmed that Kelly displayed narcissistic traits and was adept at playing the victim. The trial lasted 4 months and was complicated. Despite the uncertainty of the indictment, the jury found Kelly Lane guilty, not of murdering Tegan, but of perjury. The verdict was handed down on December 13, 2010. The trial reconvened on April 15, 2011, when Kelly confessed to killing Tegan. She was sentenced to 18 years in prison. As a mother unable to care for her many children, she began her sentence in prison, with all of her appeals being rejected. During the trial, Kelly displayed no emotions, appearing indifferent to her baby's fate, which likely influenced the jury's decision. After entering prison, she broke up with Aaron but continued to send him love letters. Meanwhile, Aaron had begun dating someone else. This new girlfriend requested in a reply letter that Kelly stop contacting them, which angered Kelly. In response, she sent letters to Aaron's new girlfriend and asked her friends to harass her. Kelly's cellmates joined in, insulting Aaron's new girlfriend on social media. The woman, tired of being harassed, decided to end her relationship with Aaron. Kelly, 48, is currently serving a prison sentence but will soon be eligible for parole. She maintains her innocence and insists that her daughter is still alive. Kelly's parents fully support her and believe the court's decision was unfair due to a lack of evidence linking Kelly to the child. In an interview, Kelly Lane revealed that she hid her pregnancy to avoid embarrassing her parents. She said that she had taken birth control pills incorrectly multiple times, leading to unwanted pregnancies. New, alarming information has emerged in connection with the case. On May 12, 2023, a taxi driver contacted the police and provided a tip. He revealed that on the day Kelly was discharged from the hospital, he had picked her and her baby up. During the ride home, Kelly asked him to stop the car. She then got out and left the baby on the side of the road. Although the driver testified to this, he did nothing at the time. After dropping Kelly off at home, he was racked with guilt and decided to go back to check on the baby. When he arrived, he saw a woman who said she would take care of the baby, but he left without any information about her. The police attempted to verify this account, but they could not find any confirmation or anyone else who had seen the woman.